Good morning, guys. Hi, my name is Dean Beyett, and this is my 2019 Trusted Tech video submission. You ready to do this, Fernando?
Ready, man.
Let's get started. Now, this journey for me started a long time ago. Back when I first got into car audio, I was just a young kid, all excited, glassy-eyed look on my face, like, ooh, knowledge, 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 knowledge. And every time I'd learn something, I'd want to share it with people. I didn't care if it was my competitor, I didn't care who it was.
Hi, I'm Shane Neville, Director of Products at Scar Audio. Before I was at Scar Audio, I was at Auto Audio for a number of years. And at that time, Dean Store and Auto Audio competed often. But with that being said, he always helped us. Anything that we needed, any extra product information that he got, he always shared it with us. That's just kind of how he is.
And then I got into social media and it was like, oh, wow, this is cool. You could take in more information and you could share that information to a bunch of people. And then I started making videos. Videos that were questions that people would walk in and they would ask, or people would ask online. Hey, how do you set the clock? How do you change the color? Simple things that I knew. Let me make something and I'll show you how to do them, because I'm a visual guy. I like to see things. And then small videos turned into bigger videos, longer videos, more in-depth videos. Me telling more things about the product so that it would cut down the amount of questions I would get. It didn't work that way. I would actually get more questions, because then they'd be learning things that they didn't even know they didn't know about. Then one day, Fernando came to me and said,
Hey man, why you don't do installation videos?
who'd watch installation videos? I was wrong about that one. A lot of people would watch installation videos.
Hi Dean, my name is Corey Reynolds. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to buy. I was looking for some information. What radio has what features? How do I actually connect this to my vehicle? How is it all going to work? And my very first experience with 5-star car stereo was finding one of your head unit reviews and your unboxings on YouTube, where you actually took that Pioneer out of the box and said, here's everything that comes in the box, here's everything that's on the back, and then flip it around, power it up, show how it works, all the features, all the menus. Exactly what I was looking for. Ever since then, I've just been absolutely hooked on everything that 5-star has to put online. I've learned a lot. Because of the perfection that you bring to the industry, I was able with confidence to do something in my vehicle.
Talking about features on radios was really cool. Talking about how those radios actually go into a car and the problems you might run into there, that's a whole nother group of people. That's when our channel exploded, because it was like, holy cow, nobody's doing this. Nobody's a working professional that's willing to go, hey man, this is how you do this. Sharing the knowledge that I've learned over the 29 years of doing installation, taking cars apart, putting cars together, how to put in things. It was all a big secret that we couldn't talk about. Don't tell anyone. So don't get me wrong, that had me concerned. But as time went on, that concern went out the window. I have just as many fans that do it for a living as do it for a hobby.
Hello everyone, my name is Jason Obzila and I work for Stereo King in Portland, Oregon. So why do I think Dean Beyett deserves to be Trusted Tech of the Year? Everything is done the right way the first time. He doesn't try to hide anything he does. Obviously, he does it all on YouTube and it's all for the world to see.
I'm 53 years old, and the reason why I'm back into car stereo systems is because Dean and 5-star car stereo. I'm 4 hours away from their shop, but every time I have to do something on my vehicles, I always go back to them. Dean is truly the master at his craft.
We have fans all over the world that are asking questions or watching and want to know. We do 6 videos a week. We have 2 live shows that we go on and we answer questions from everywhere you could possibly think on every subject 12-volt related. We thought we'd take that to the next step. Now we do 6 days a week of live content, and I get to share new things that I'm playing with, or that I just heard about, or stuff I'm not supposed to talk about, which unfortunately I do a lot. Sorry, manufacturers. Because manufacturers tell me things, or they give us things, or they call me, or they ask me, hey, what do you think about this? What do you do about that? It was one of the scariest parts about going and making video, is that I'm going to open myself up for everyone that does this to critique. So I knew it had to be at a level that was mine. And that's the easiest way to say that, mine. I have a certain way that I do things, and I share my way of doing things. Now, in doing it that way, our channel has 103,000 subscribers. We do 4.3 million minutes a month. That's 788,000 views a month. That's crazy amount of people that are interacting in a 12-volt group. We have a lot of fun, and hopefully After you're done watching my video, you'll have had a lot of fun too, and maybe have learned something. So join me now as we take a look at the first car and my submission.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a minute to tell you about Dean Beyett, good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. I am, by the way, Nathan Winsek from Amp Global. I'm the VP of the Integration Division, which is responsible for the PAC product line. Dean and I go way back. I've known him since high school days. Got into car audio about the same time. We've worked on many sound systems together, built some really cool things. Dean has a really impressive drive and passion for this industry, for what he does day in and day out. You know, I think he's very worthy of this Trusted Tech Award. He doesn't hesitate for a minute to help someone out. He's always looking for new information, always learning new things, better ways to do things, looking for new ways to reach the consumer. For many years as an industry, we've lamented the fact that we don't really have an ongoing conversation with the consumer. What Dean has been able to accomplish with his show, I think it's the best that we've ever had, having a continuing conversation with the consumer about car audio and what we offer. The other thing that's really impressive about Dean is that he's always concerned about the impressions that the industry and retailers give to the end user, to the consumer. There's, unfortunately, in our industry, we know there's people that don't always do things the right way. That reflects poorly on our industry. Dean is the polar opposite of that, and he works every day to improve the reputation, the image of our industry by doing quality work, sharing that work on the internet, again, creating more awareness for consumers that you can trust someone to work on your car and do a good job. Of course, he's always willing to share what he does day in and day out with other retailers, other installers, and I think he's been a huge positive influence on our industry. I think it would be really great if he's awarded this Trusted Tech Award.
We have it in the base. Let's go ahead and you can show me what we got going on. Go ahead and hop in the driver's seat.
When I turn it on, it starts popping a lot. I'll hear a lot of popping noises.
Okay.
From time to time when I'm driving, the system will just completely cut out.
Is that an RCA stuck behind your gas pedal?
It is. I've been having to tuck this back behind the brakes when I'm driving.
Wow.
There's that. The other thing...
Okay. You paid someone to install this.
I did. Unfortunately, I did.
Now, how many times have you been back?
4 times.
You've been back 4 times?
Yeah.
Okay, I can see why you didn't want to go back.
The other thing is there's a very obnoxious humming noise always coming from usually the front left speaker.
Really?
Mm-hmm. There's always a humming noise going. But just the quality of the sound as well. I'm not as thrilled as I could be. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and turn it on and see what it sounds like.
So unfortunately, we won't be able to listen to it because it is not working right now. It died.
Oh, so we can't even listen to it?
No.
Oh, okay. All right, well, let's talk about what we plan on doing here. Are we going to keep this factory radio because it's integrated real sharp, or do we want to put in a new radio?
I'd rather put in the new radio.
Okay, because I know they do make a dash kit for this. That's cool. Now, I see you have Sirius Xm. Do we want to retain Sirius Xm?
If possible, that would be great, but
okay.
if it's not with that, I understand.
So what we need to do that is they do make a add-on tuner for that called the SVX 300.
Okay.
And they make what's called a SAT1 antenna adapter, and that will allow us to keep Sirius XM. You will have to change your tuner. Now the other option is, what kind of phone do you have?
iPhone.
You can do Sirius XM from CarPlay.
That would be awesome.
And so you won't actually have to pay for a subscription, the car subscription, you just use the web subscription.
Okay.
And it actually sounds better.
Imagine. Yeah.
So funny.
Okay.
All right. Do we have a factory USB? Yes. Okay. So we can retain that. You have steering wheel controls, so retain those. So they obviously put an amplifier in here. Where's that at?
So the amplifier is going to be mounted on the back right seat.
All right. Well, since we can't hear it, there's no point being here any longer. Let's hop into the back. All right. Let's take a look. It's mounted to the back of the seat, I see.
Right.
We have 3 different RCAs and one just hanging out, and I see it in the seat there.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that appeared after you took it back for one of your 4 services.
Exactly. Yeah.
Something cutting out, or did they just do that hopefully to fix your driver's door speaker?
I truly don't know. It's I really don't know.
Oh wow, you can see the RCA right there. Oh my gosh, they ran 18 gauge speaker wire for the subwoofer. Now, are we keeping this sub?
We're not.
We're not. What are we going to do for subs?
We're going to put 2 10s in there.
Oh wow, okay, that'll be cool.
So.
All right, well, let's take a look underneath the hood to see what we have for a fuse holder. Okay. Oh wow. We have some extra wire here. It's zip tied into place. Oh no, the zip tie, oh there's one zip, okay. So just put a zip tie over the cover. Well, that's actually not a bad thing because these covers typically fall off. That's why we don't like to use these underneath the hood, because they don't really clip into place.
Oh, okay.
I prefer the waterproof kind that twist together, and of course we'll make a mount that's actually going to hold it in place.
Okay,
so
nice.
that, you know, if you go to a dealer or something like that, when you go to service the battery, it's not going to just be like, hey, look at this.
Right.
The plan today is we're going to do what we call 911 rescue.
Okay.
We're going to pull out everything that they've done. Every single piece. We're going to pull out the RCAs, the power wire, everything. We're going to pull all your doors off because you had new speakers put in.
Right.
And we're going to make sure that the speakers are mounted properly, they're connected properly. Try to figure out why that one's doing some funny stuff.
Yeah.
My guess is they cut the harness behind the radio to put in some form of a high level to low level adapter. So we'll go ahead and solder that all back together, tape it up, make it look as factory as possible. And then we'll put in your new radio, get the amplifier all put back in. Now, as far as on the seat goes, we're not going to do that.
Okay.
Amplifiers, yes, you can mount them to the back of the seats, but as you found, you've had problems there.
Yeah,
Wires
absolutely.
are getting pinched.
Right.
We don't like to mount amplifiers to the back of the seats because of that specific reason. I know you use your trunk to haul a lot of stuff.
I do.
So we know we're going to be putting 210s here in that box. It's going to be all the way up against the back seat.
Right.
But what that's going to leave us is plenty of room here.
On the side.
Or on the side.
Perfect.
So we're going to make an ABS panel. It's going to allow us to mount the amplifier there.
Okay.
That way you'll be able to still remove the box if you need to put in your 6,000 crates of windows and doors.
All my stuff.
Yeah, all the stuff. And you'll be able to fold your seats back down. If you need to slide something through, you won't have to worry about scraping the top of the amplifier.
That would be awesome.
So you get full functionality back.
Okay.
So how did you find us?
I was actually just Googling down the street trying to find somewhere, and then I started looking at all the reviews.
Right.
Found some YouTube videos of you guys, and immediately was like, I got to get in there. This is probably the place to go to get this all taken care of.
Now, before we get started on this, is there anything you want to ask us? I'm a firm believer in tell me or ask me anything now before we get started.
Okay.
You really can't do it once we're done.
That humming noise,
Yes.
is that going to be gone?
Okay, that's definitely priority one, is to make sure there's no humming noise when we're done. And I don't think we're going to have that problem. I think
Okay.
I know what is causing that, which is the high level to low level behind the dash.
Okay.
More than likely is jammed into there, and one of the RCAs is probably loose and touching metal, and or the module itself is resting up against something it shouldn't be.
Okay.
We're going to be putting a new radio in, so that's to solve that problem, shy
Sweet.
of course, putting in a DSP or something like that.
Awesome.
All right, let me walk you back out, and we'll
right.
get started on your pride and joy.
Appreciate it.
No problem. So now that we've listened to the customer tell us all the problems he has with the car, it's time for us to come up with a game plan to move through this and get to the result that he wants in the end. Now, no matter what job it is, we always have a certain set of things, just like putting on seat covers, steering wheel covers. When it comes to audio, we also have a certain set of procedures that we have in place in order to get us to the end result we're looking for. And in this case, even though we're not doing a DSP, the radio that we're putting in has one built into it. It has time alignment, has EQs, crossovers, all those fun things. And we use them because why wouldn't we? It's going to give us a better sound in the end, which will give us a happier customer. What we want to do first, we measure the seat, meaning the location the seat was when it came in. When we pull the car in, we don't adjust the seat. So now what we're going to do is we're going to measure this. Now this is a procedure we just started doing, oddly enough, in like the last 6 or 7 months. And up until this point, we just draw a diagram and we measure out what we need. We do this in any situation where we are going to be using the DSP. One of the reasons why we're just using it on paper right now is because we're putting together an idea of how we want this to look, feel, and be. We figured we'd do a ton of these, try things differently, and then we'll go ahead and we'll have a sheet printed up similar to a check-in sheet that will allow us to easily put in just the numbers, come back in and adjust the seat so that it's where it was when it came in, and then we can take our measurements for the time alignment. There's a couple positions that we've found we like to take because we'll move the steering wheel as well as the back of the seat, the bottom of the seat. Sometimes we have to lift it up and down. So we take a measurement from here to here, from here to the crack of the seat, from the bottom of the steering wheel to the top of the seat. Then we go from the brake pedal to the front of the seat. We go from the bottom of the seat to the floor. And then we go from the butt of the seat here also up to the roof here. And all those measurements will allow us to get the seat back to where it was. Now that we have those, we'll go ahead and set this aside to the end of the install. We'll put the seat cover back in place. particular car, he's already got aftermarket speakers, he's got an amplifier, he's got a high level to low level adapter. There is tons of places where the speakers could have gotten wired up wrong. And we know that somewhere there has to be, because it's not even playing right now and we have a hum. But if this wasn't that situation, what we'd do is we'd grab our test CD and we would do a polarity test using our polarity tester, so that we would know from the get-go if the factory has the speakers in polarity or out of polarity, if the factory mid-range and the factory tweeter are both in or out of polarity. That way when we're doing our system, we can figure out how we want to approach it. Do we want to leave it out of polarity? Do we want to put it back into polarity? Is the speaker we're putting in out of polarity? Is it the same way? Is it different? So there's a lot of considerations, and knowing that from the get-go speeds up the end results. You don't want to be at the very end and have to go, oh crap, the tweeters were wrong from what we wanted. Now that's not to prevent us from accidentally wiring something up backwards, but that's why we check it in the end to make sure that we don't do that. Unfortunately, in this car, we can't even do that because it has no sound. Nothing works, which means we're real limited as far as what we can do on a check-in. We're just gonna fast forward to the rescue that we're doing on that car. Now, anytime you start on a car that already has an existing amplifier on it and you're gonna be doing amplifier work, naturally you wanna disconnect the battery. We're gonna be pulling out all the wiring that's in this car, all of it. So the first place we wanna start is at the battery and just disconnect it and get it out of the way. I don't know why they couldn't cut it to length. We're going to be pulling this wire out, so we'll just go ahead and remove this all together. When we're done, we'll be mounting our ring terminal in here as well, so we'll just leave it like that for right now and cover it back up. Another reason why we are pulling this wire out is that they ran CCA 4-gauge wire here. The reason why that's such a big deal is that if you're going to be using CCA wire, you have to scale it up a size. What that means is that this amplifier would require a 4-gauge power wire. It has 3 30-amp fuses, making it a 90-amp current draw. A 4-gauge CCA wire is not rated for that. A real 4-gauge wire is. So it would have needed a 0-gauge CCA wire. What that means is that as time goes on, that wire underneath the hood is going to heat up, the shielding will eventually melt away, and or the fuse holder itself that wasn't mounted properly is going to melt around the ends and could potentially melt into the top of the battery. It's actually a good thing that he's here, because we could prevent his car from getting burned to the ground. Ooh, look at this. So we have 3 screws here holding this 4-gauge power wire in, which I understand, it's a common practice. There's even a terminal called an URL that is designed around that premise. But what I don't understand is over here, it looks like we have 3 more holes that at one point the amplifier might have been grounded there. And they're not filled in with any type of silicone or anything like that. Here in Florida, where it rains a ton, water is definitely gonna come up through these holes. We'll have to make sure we cover these back up, because we're not gonna be using these ground points. Oh, what the heck? What is this? So over here, we have a whole nother ground. I wonder if he had like a sub amp in here at one point and they just didn't bother to unscrew it. Now, one of the reasons I don't enjoy doing these 911s is not for what you're thinking. Not because it's work and we have to do extra work like check over somebody else's stuff. No, I don't mind doing that. I want to make sure everyone has the best experience possible in the industry I've chosen to make as a profession. What aggravates me about these is that this guy spent his hard-earned money that he could have done anything else with in his life, but he decided that he wanted to upgrade his stereo because he's a traveling salesman. He wants to make sure that when he's in his car, he has the best experience possible. He's in his car 6-8 hours a day. He's been living with this crappy sound, this headache, hating his car, which in turn means he hates our industry because the people he picked first did such a crappy job. When he buys his next car, he might say, you know what, I want to make sure it has all the features in it from the factory because I don't want to deal with this. He's been back to the other company 4 times and they haven't been able to fix his issues. It can't be that hard. We're not saving lives here.
Mike Eckley, Amp Global, Team Phantom, Florida. It's a public endorsement for Dean for 5-star for trusted tech. Good luck, Dean.
Oh, we got a butt connector and a, oh, is that a live wire sticking out of there?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So that was just
So
buried
that
up
was
on
just right here like that.
Oh, for gosh sakes. So one of the most popular videos we do on YouTube has by far been our 911 rescues. It's also poking fun at some of the practices that happen in our industry that are really depressing. Now when he leaves here, that's not going to be the case. We're going to make sure of that, as we do all our customers, regardless of what they're having done or installed. It doesn't matter to me. You spent your money. We're going to give you 110%, if not more, of what we can do. I'm going to stop talking because we are also on a deadline for this, and we need to start getting it apart. Now that we've gone ahead and disconnected the battery, what we want to do is get these door panels off, start getting these panels apart, get that radio out of the dash, find out what's going on behind there, what we have to fix, as well as, like I said, the door panels. We need to find out how the speakers are mounted. Basically, I can't wait to see what it is. This is like archaeology, just uncovering the mysteries of what these other guys did to this poor guy's car. Now here at 5-Star, we have one install bay and we have 2 installers, and we work as a team. Everything we do is as a team. We divide the work according to how we want to get through this. In doing so, it takes a little bit of forethought because we don't want each other getting in each other's way. What that means is that right now, Fernando is going to go ahead and start getting the doors on the driver's side apart, and I'm going to come in through the passenger side and start getting the radio apart. I'll take the passenger floor sills apart, get the back seat, get as much stuff on this side of the car as I can get done, and then we'll switch sides and he can come over here and work on this side of the car and I'll work on that side of the car. It allows us to be more efficient and not be on top of each other, getting in each other's way, and we can move through these cars at a faster pace. As an installer, one of the things you should put out of your mind right away is that you know everything. You don't. You can't possibly know everything. You can't possibly know how to take every car apart, how to integrate with every stereo. What you want to concentrate on knowing is A, where to find the information, and B, how to use the tools to do the job properly. We have to pull this dash apart. The kit manufacturer does a great job of providing us with wonderful instructions on how to do that. Knowing that they do that is what you need to know. That way you can go before you start, grab the instructions, read them over, figure out how the radio comes out, and not scratch, break, twist, bend, improperly pull any parts of the dash. It has to go back the same way it came in. Another thing is use the right tool for the right job. If you're pulling a dash apart, plastic on plastic, you want to use a nylon pry tool to do that. At this point, we're not really surprised we're gonna find shoddy craftsmanship. In this air vent here, the RCA is actually caught up into the air vent. This is the new one they just ran. It's getting caught into the actual air vent when you put the dash can on. Dozen screws that hold this all in, and they're all wrong. They've lost some and tried to come up with things that don't match. Really? This sucks. Now they make T-harnesses for these cars that cost about 30 bucks. At some point, you gotta figure this guy's gonna be taking this equipment out and putting it back to factory, but somehow you decided that cutting it at a ½ inch away from the plug was your best course of action. Here's that RCA I was talking about that's stuck into the air vent. So we have this big ball of tape here. Brown wire in this, the shield ground, and they have it taped to these 2 wires here. And here was the ground. My guess that was in there somewhere too. It's just hanging out. Wow, what is all, oh, we got tape. We got a lot of tape. Oh, we have some, what are these? Those don't even, oh, that's that. What do these go to? I don't even know what these go to. Oh, okay. So we have an LP74 and an LP72. They just cut the speaker, wide them together here. Woo! Looks like they almost pulled the wire out of this harness here. Oh my gosh. Oh, they broke the air conditioner mount right here, and it wasn't screwed in. That's why it popped off when we were taking the dash off. So behind the radio, it's pretty much worst case scenario as far as what these goofballs did. We're gonna have a lot of fun soldering that harness back together with how close they cut those wires. Let's take a look at the doors. Fernando's got those off. It looks like they used some kind of adapter. I don't know why they didn't use the factory holes. And then they just have this screwed in. They've crimp capped it on there. There again, that's not the end of the world there. They used some kind of a beaver to drill a hole through here. Let's go ahead and unscrew that off. And then in the back door, this must be the factory mount. Oh, I know what they did. Apparently they didn't give this guy back his factory speakers. My guess is that those are the factory speakers.
Yeah, come and check it out. still surround over here.
This was the hole for the plug, and they just cut it off. Oh yeah, because there's the wire right there. That's the pin. They pulled it off the door.
Yes.
And then they didn't put the, either riveted or screws. Here's the peel rubber from the surround. So those are the factory speakers. They make adapters for this that cost about 15 bucks. Way cheaper than what a new set of speakers to put back in if he ever decides to trade his car in and keep his nice speakers. Now, I don't even know if he's aware of this. The front speakers and the rear speakers don't even match. These are Pioneer 4-ways, and these are JL Audio 2-ways. And the front door is a component. Was the tweeter connected?
Yeah.
Oh wow, oh my gosh. Wow, so they soldered the tinsel leads uninsulated right to, you can't make this stuff up, man. You have got to be kidding me. Hey, quick question.
Sure.
What speakers did you buy?
So I got Alpines and JLs.
You mean you got Pioneers and JLs?
Pioneers and JLs, yes.
Okay, and you bought coaxials up front?
Yes.
You want to see what they did?
I would love to see what they did.
No, you wouldn't. So this is the rear speaker. So they didn't give you back your factory speakers.
No.
Yeah. You know why?
Why is that?
These are your factory speakers. They ripped your factory speakers apart to make the mounting for your new speakers.
Right.
These are the tinsel leads off of the old speakers. They just soldered them uninsulated directly to this speaker and then plugged it in. They probably patted themselves on the back for that one, thinking that was pretty cool.
Right.
But yeah, that's why you didn't get your factory speakers back.
I should have gotten them back.
You should have gotten them back. Now,
Right.
another thing too, hop into the driver's side here.
Okay.
So they used two high level to low level adapters. This one was for the highs, this one is for the sub. This is your harness. They cut it. That is going to be really fun for us to put back together, but we will be putting it back together. The new RCA that they ran, this one, if you'll notice how it has this kink in it right here.
Yep.
It was stuck in this air vent like this. Even though they ran a new one, when they put it in, they still managed to screw it up. So yeah,
All right.
we'll fix it. I just wanted you to see.
No, for sure. I
because
appreciate it.
So fortunately, the customer is actually waiting for a ride, so it was still here by the time we got the car apart and we saw what was going on with the speakers and the radio. We still haven't got to the floor sills yet, but at this point, I really don't think anything is going to surprise us that much more. What we need to do now is come up with a game plan for reattaching the speakers. We're obviously not going to use the old speakers and remount them that way. Two choices in which we have for replicating this. We here manufacture any type of bracket that is required in order to put an aftermarket speaker back into the factory spot. We divide them into manufacturers, like there's Nissan, there's Hyundai, European oddballs, GM, Toyota. You get the idea. And we have all the tools in order to do that. And we make them all out of plastic. We have ABS, and on the other side we have Sentra of various shapes and sizes. This is the only wood we have in the store, and that's actually for building another workbench that we haven't had time to get to. We also stock, as you can see here, as many factory speaker bracket adapters from whoever, we don't care, to speed things up. And most of the time they do a really good job at these. The second option is to see if we actually have a bracket for that car. And we do. It's in that bag right there, which is this guy right here. That means we're going to drill out the holes here that were the factory mounts, and we're going to install threaded rivets to screw the speaker back into place just like if it was a factory speaker. Now this is a threaded rivet insert tool, and what it's designed to do is just like a normal rivet, you put it in, you pull these two handles, and then once it's set, you unscrew it, and that's the threaded rivet part. Now we can go in and add in a screw that will screw in nice and tight and hold our bracket in place. The other thing we're gonna do to this bracket is we order in 1/32 of an inch foam. And what this foam is for is when you're mounting two pieces of material on top of one another, sometimes it vibrates. To prevent any vibration, we apply it to the back side of the speaker mount as well as the front side of the speaker mount if the speaker manufacturer doesn't already put foam on the back of their speakers, which some manufacturers do. Like all things here, there's a process and a reason why we do it a certain way. For example, I said we use 1/32 of an inch foam, and there was a very specific reason why I said that. When we started doing this, we were trying all the speakers we have in stock. Some manufacturers make their speaker brackets out of a composite material, and it flexes pretty easy. That 1/16 of an inch foam or an 1/8 of an inch foam behind that basket will actually cause bowing where the screw screws down. We got in several different thicknesses to figure out which one worked the best. test. Let me get this over to Fernando so that he can then get that screwed into place. We're just gonna go ahead and screw the brackets on. We'll get the speaker mounted in a little bit later. The other thing about this particular installation, now that we've talked to the customer and showed him what's going on, he bought a set of coaxials for the front door instead of components. That's what they sold him. I don't know why. So in the future, he's actually gonna upgrade that to a set of components, replacing the factory weak tweeter, and make it sound a lot better. He was unaware that it was as affordable as it is. Now they also sold him on something that I'm not a big fan of, 2 different types of speakers. When you're selling something to sell something just to fill a hole, not educating the consumer on what you're doing and just trying to make a buck is very shady. Everything about this is shady. Here's the finished product. It's now screwed back into place, easily serviceable. We have our foam on both sides. Now we'll be able to get our speaker back in. We have a proper hole for the speaker wire to run through. One of the other things to consider when putting speakers in the doors like this is some form of a sound treatment. We like to always recommend adding some form of roadkill to the door. The problem we have in a situation like this is that he's already been fooled once. For him, I'm gonna save that conversation until we do the upgrade when we add in the higher end components up front. By then, we'll have built some trust into the relationship. One thing we are gonna add to this is some foam, such as a fast ring, to the front to help couple that speaker to the door to give it the best chance to get all that sound and all that energy into the car and not just wasted to the left and right of the speaker. Now what I wanna do is show you what it looks like underneath those floor sills. This is what's underneath the seat when it sits down. The bottom of the seat is going to crush into this, and over time what's going to happen is that we can see here, this hasn't even been installed that long. You can see where that RCA has already left a mark. This is all, here's the power wire. The power wire is already sunk into it. Here's the RCA. Oh, here's the remote turn on. It all needs to be routed in with the factory harness. Everything is down this side. There's nothing down the passenger side. Just it's all right here.
Hey Dean, this is Craig from Minnesota. Been following you guys for a while now. I got into car stereo mid-90s when I got my license in my first car. Been changing out radios and speakers ever since. Then I got married and kind of got out of it for a while and came across your channel and decided that I needed to start doing it again. Watching you guys and what you do has helped me do my installations a whole lot better. I've helped out a couple of friends. I went and spent the money and got the DD1, got a tone generator, the polarity checker. I'm doing everything the way that it should be done. Thank you so much for what you do.
Just a few seconds ago in the video clip, I had mentioned that adding sound treatment and upgrading to some components, we were gonna wait till the next time. Well, because we've planted that seed in his head and he's super excited now about getting this thing done right, he changed his mind. It happens. That means we're gonna go ahead and upgrade the front speakers to some components. They're gonna be Pioneers, so they'll match the rears. We're also going to add in a little bit of sound treatment to the panel behind the speaker, as well as where the speaker mounts itself. Plan is to finish pulling out all the wire. Test of tape does not make you a good installer. Just makes the wires sticky. All the wires out of the car now. We have this side completely apart as well as the back completely apart. When installing in the back of the car, we find it's a little bit easier to just go ahead and remove the whole back seat. If we're gonna be doing any amount of time where we're gonna be sitting back here, I don't like to sit on the seat itself. You can bend it and affect the brackets, and sometimes it doesn't close properly. Plus, we're gonna need to get into this area right here so we can run our wires. That also clears up that area there so we can run the signal down this side of the car. Adding the components to the installation, we've really kind of like almost ourselves because we're on a time clock here, and that's definitely going to add some time to the installation. And the reason why is because adding components isn't as simple as just screwing speakers in and calling it a day. You have to find a place to mount the crossovers. That's important. These things need to be mounted firmly into the door. They also need to be in a place that's going to be dry because they're not waterproof. A place to where you pull the door panel off, they're just not going to fall out. It's serviceable. They need to be part of the car. There's a couple different places we mount these. And in an installation like this, there's two that we choose from. First we look at the door panel, and this is a perfect area for it. There's plenty of room for us to run our wires. Problem is, in order for it to go here, we order these plugs here in. If he ever needs to take his car in for service, you can just unplug these simply, take the door panel off. It's clean, it's simple, it's just like any other plug in the car. The other option we've come up with is finding a place to mount it with on the door itself. If we do that, then we don't have to add this stuff in. It's going to be physically part of the door and will not affect taking the door panel on and off. Placing the door panel that we were just looking at is this area right here. What we could also do is make a mount using those bolts that allows us to mount this right here. It's going to be screwed in place so it can easily come off if we need it to. We can use the factory wiring harness to integrate it into the car. Doing it that way, the tweeter is attached to the door panel. For that, we stock in these guys here, male and female of this harness, so that you can still unplug and plug back in the tweeter just like you can from the factory. Now when cutting apart a harness to reattach, like in this case, you kind of want to pay attention. You just don't want to go at it and cut it all to pieces. For this one, there's 2 orange wires, so I want to make sure that they stay together in their pairs. The other thing that I'm noticing here too is that somehow I've lost about 3 inches of wire between this and this. That means I'm gonna have to go ahead and lengthen these wires as well. I decided that the best course of action for us to do is just go ahead and cut this harness all the way out of the car, because there's only 3 wires that are left, and take it over to the bench. That way I'll have a little bit more control instead of working in the car right here, and then we can just bring it back in and solder it into place. So we've cut about 6 inches of all the matching wires on this harness. Very carefully remove these connectors and solder these extensions on. Inspect your joint and add some shrink wrap. And we'll repeat that procedure through all the harness. We've rebuilt the harness, we've lengthened all wires to the same length. Now we'll go ahead and strip these and get it into the car. This blue thing here is a solder mat. We have it clipped into place up on the dash to protect all of this. We have a portable soldering iron. We can come in here and solder these 2 wires together. When soldering back together a harness, you have speaker wire side and you have the power wire side. If you notice when I was cutting these wires one at a time. One of these might be a power or ignition or accessory or a CAN bus or any other thing that doesn't need to be cut with another wire. When you're soldering them together, also solder them 1 wire at a time so that only 1 wire is exposed at one time and it doesn't accidentally touch something else. The factory harness is rebuilt and back to normal. We're gonna wait for this to cool down and then we'll tape it up using a factory style tape. Now that we have the factory harness all put together, it's time to do some testing on that harness. We have factory backup camera we have to integrate into, the USB we have to integrate back into, steering wheel controls we have to integrate back into. So we have a couple parts that we're gonna be using for that. So we wanna do some testing now to make sure that those are gonna work once we get to that final stage of assembly. This is the factory USB aux connector, and PAC does make a harness that will plug into this. But what we've found is that most of the time it does not function. So we want to test that first. Then Access makes a backup camera retention cable that we want to test to make sure it works also. For steering wheel controls, we're using the SWI CP2. And then of course we have the factory plug adapter. We're going to power up the radio we're going to put in. On our workbenches we all have power supplies to test equipment. Plug in the USB. The radio has power. So we're getting a charge light indicator, which is good. However, the connectivity light here isn't showing up. Let's bypass the unit. And CarPlay launches. So that means that this cable isn't going to function the way we were hoping to. Put this back in the bag until we're ready for it once we get to the kit assembly. We're not surprised that happened. I'm pretty sure we've only had that cable work in maybe 1 or 2 cars that we've ever done. But we have a solution. Pop this apart and pull out the main circuit board. And then we're going to tape this to the top of the factory radio because we're not going to need it anymore. What we are going to do is need this mount. Now he has an iPhone, which means he's not going to be using the aux jack. But if he was, we sell an aux jack that we can put into this hole. What we're going to do is put a black piece of plastic in here just to cover the hole. Then we're going to take a USB cable that we stock just for this particular purpose. We're going to remove part of the shielding here. Once we get it all cut and shaped, it's actually going to back mount into there. We plug the front piece of it just to make sure it's lined up and add some glue into those pieces to hold them both in place. The glue that we use is called CA glue. It's a 2-part glue. It's a thicker version of it. I like the thickness. It gives us a little bit of building and we have time to move it around and get it to the places we want. You don't want any of this to leak up. So I always like to hold it like this while I'm using it. That way all that will run down. Hold it like this for a couple of minutes just to make sure that it's nice and dry. Inspect it to make sure everything is mounted very tight. The last step we do is put this flexible tubing over the wire so that while it runs through the dash, it has a protective layer over it. Thread it back through the mounting, clips together. The one other step I like to do is add a zip tie to this to hold it all in place. This is all set and ready to get into the car. Since we're headed back into the car, let's look at this backup camera retention cable. It's a in and out cable, and what that means is that you have the version that plugs into the factory side and the other side that plugs into your factory radio. You have a male and female RCA end here and a bunch of other wires. What we really want to look at is this guy right here where it says camera power 6 volts. This isn't going to provide the 6 volts required in order to turn on our factory camera. If we hook it up to 12 volts, it'll just blow up the camera. Now to stop that from happening, we need a step down converter. We use the PackVolt 3.9. This allows us to step down multiple voltages. Along with doing 6 volts, this will also do 9 volts, 5 volts, and 3.3 volts. Because we're just gonna need to do some testing, we can quickly wire this up. It's a 4-wire hookup. The white red on here is going to be the output going to our camera. We have a red, which is going to be our main power, and then our trigger is blue. In this case, we're going to be using main power and trigger as the same thing. We're not turning on an amplifier or anything like that. The 5-volt output on this is great for when you're doing an older Ford where you have the amplifier you need to turn on. Those amplifiers need 5 volts. They'll take 12 volts, but then you get that huge pop. Using this will eliminate that. Twist our grounds together. If we wanted, we could go ahead and use this to power it up, but we're not going to. We have this tool here, which is specifically designed to test cameras. It's a CCTV camera tester, but it also works really well in our industry. It comes with a 12-volt output that we can just attach onto our cable here, and here has an input. Turn it on. Now we can go ahead and take all this stuff into the car. Simple enough run to put in the USB, get that back up. We'll just set it here for right now. Once we get the harness from here moved back over, we'll zip tie that all into place. This small 18-pin harness is right here. It's not in the main power plug harness. Plug in, grab our camera tester. We can see the camera is on. It's aimed at the ceiling right now because our trunk lid is open. It does have backup lines that are built into the camera. The other thing while looking at this harness is all these wires that this has. This is a ton of wiring. And really all we have on the harness are 5 wires. That's it. This plug just has 5 wires in it. We don't need any of these extra wires going here. I can remove all these, not have them in the dash, getting cluttered, giving an opportunity to get snagged on something. The other thing we want to check, because we are putting in a backup camera, is whether or not the reverse wire is analog or digital. If it's analog, we'll be able to find it in the harness with a digital multimeter. If it's digital, it won't be here in the harness because it's done over a bus system. There was no smart harness required for this car, so my guess is it is in here, but there's no point in guessing. We need to test. Grab our digital multimeter, we're gonna set it to DC, that's the line with the dots below it. What I like to do is go to the main ground that's in the harness, which is this black wire here. I also like to take my meter and test it to make sure that it's functioning and that I have 2 good connections. So I'll go over to what I know is constant 12 volts, and I get 12 volts. That means I have a good ground. Looking at these harnesses, there's a couple things to note. On the speaker harness, there is an extra gray wire that isn't in this harness, so that's something to think about. And on the main wiring harness, it has 3 extra wires here and a bunch of extra wires in the harness itself. Now I know these extra 3 wires here, 2 of them are for steering wheel controls, so I know it's not gonna be those. And then when we were looking at the camera connector, I had said there's 5 wires. Well, typically on a backup camera, you only need 4 wires, 2 for power and ground, 2 for signal and shield. I'm gonna start here, so I feel that it may be in this harness. I like to start with the car already in reverse. That gives me 12 volts. Let me go ahead and pull it out of reverse. and it goes away. We found the reverse wire. To depin this harness, I like to use this Delphi depinner. In this case, it just pushes in, remove, and the wire comes out. You just need to repeat that through the rest of the harness. That leaves us with this much nicer, cleaner harness that we can attach the Volt 3.9 to. This harness is all set. What we've done is we've added in that Volt 3.9, made it part of the harness itself, and we've made these colors at the end what we're looking for. An accessory, red, solid, purple, white, which is your standard color for reverse, and of course a ground. We can integrate those into our harness that we're going to build here that's going to attach to the radio. The CP2 is a programmable stereo control interface. It has these dip switches right here that allow you to tell it what car it's going in and what radio it's getting connected to. And that information is controlled by an app on your phone. Once you launch the app, it's going to ask you, you're going to be using a CP2 or a CP5. Then you type in the car's information. Now it'll give you the dip switch code. So this is telling it it's in a Hyundai, and this one is telling it's connected to an Alpine. And though I've been told I don't need to, I always like to tape up over the switches so that while it's in the dash, there's nothing that's going to bump those. Then it just looks better than having an open bank of dip switches. The next page is the most important one. This is the one that tells us where our wiring is for the steering wheel control, and it's all on this main wiring harness here. To get a good reference point, I always grab whatever is constant 12 volts, in this case yellow, and figure out where that's at. And that tells me that I'm looking at the harness the right way. In this case, 12 is constant 12 volts. That's this right here. Now I know if I come over from the top 4, which is this green orange, and if I come over from the bottom 5, that's going to be this black. Those are the two wires that I'm going to use to connect my steering wheel control interfaces. Now this is a very unique harness in that it gives you these wires in the harness. It's the only one I've ever seen that does that. Most of the time what happens is that if there is wiring like the steering wheel control, what I like to do, because I don't like cutting into the other side, is I'll go grab a second one of these, pull the pins out that I need from that harness, put them into my harness, and then I have a box where I keep all my open harnesses that I just use to pull out pins so I can pin them into these so I don't have to cut any harnesses. This is telling us what we need from the CP2. Constant 12 volts yellow, our black ground, our secondary output ground, our red accessory, and the white red, and the rest of the wires will not be used. That means we should be able to hook these wires up to this harness and plug it in, and it should work. So let's do that real quick. With the unit plugged in, we see a red light. What should happen is when we hit a button over here, it should switch to green. And we want to test every button. Volume up, volume down, track up, track down, mode, mute, all the phone buttons, and we get green on all of them. And the reason why you want to test every single one, some cars there's actually 2 or 3 or 4 steering wheel control wires, or it's a data bus and you have 2 data buses you have to attach to, or there's a loop harness that needs to be installed to loop the phone buttons back through. And that's really all the testing we have to do for this particular vehicle to see what works and doesn't work before we get the radio into the dash. Doing some pre-check work like this makes life a lot easier in the end. Once we're already almost done thinking we're yay rounding the corner, and then find out no, the USB doesn't work, and no, the backup camera doesn't work, and why? Let's head back over to the bench, get all these harnesses made up. Final assembly on the harness is complete. We have a couple different things going on here. We're going to be using speed wire coming from the amplifier to in the dash to power up our speakers. We've taken the factory speaker wires along with the remote turn on from the radio. The remote turn on loops all the way through the harness and comes out here to the end. Speed wire is a 9-conductor wire. It basically has all 8 speakers and the remote turn on built into it. So they're all right here, so we can easily attach that onto this. Backup camera, as we've already talked about. Steering wheel controls are now integrated into the main harness. The radio we've used has a big external fuse holder, so we've taped that up and set that off to the side. Steering wheel control will plug into the radio along with our main harness. This guy is complete.
Hello everybody, John Schneid with Dynamic Sales and Marketing. We're a rep firm here in Florida, and I wanted to give my recommendation, suggestion, support for Dean Beyett. I've known Dean for quite a few years, but not many guys, if any, that I ever bump into has the passion for the mobile electronics like this guy does. He eats sleeps, drinks it at all hours of the day. The drive he has and the knowledge he's out looking for and the help the consumer to industry guys has been really helpful. I need more guys like him. The industry needs more guys like him. Really appreciate it and looking for the support for Dean. Thank you.
So we've gone ahead and added our roadkill sound treatment to the front doors. Those are the doors we're concerned with. We did what we call our speaker special, in that we concentrate on just doing the speakers. It's a smaller pack. We don't do what I call the full baked potato, which is every single thing you possibly see. We just really emphasize the location. And in this case, it's this side of the door. We're worried about this making noise and rattling, so we put most of our effort into the panel on the back of the speaker, and then we add to the front here, also reinforce that. On the rear door panel, we're not doing any of the sound treatment, but we've riveted in the speaker bracket. We've used a speaker bracket. We've used the right screws to actually screw the speaker in. When they had put it in, they used big panhead screws, which are overlapping and not actually screwing the speaker flat into the door. We've taped up our wiring. We don't have the red tape like they have, but all their wiring is taped up, so ours is the same as well. This means we can go ahead and put our door panel back on. This guy is done. To hold the crossover, the mount we made, we said it mounts to these two bolts here. There was also a factory clip up here that allowed us to make a little tongue that would stick into it. Then we built in an L right here. That way we can put a screw here as well to hold this so that it's not vibrating. The crossover now we can line up with the door and it'll mount just like this, and that will allow us to bring all our speaker wires up and integrate like we talked about. This is the final look at how the crossover mounted. All our ends are color coded. We've insulated all our wiring. It is all zip tied in place. Goes into our hole. And then the last thing we have is the tweeter that we need to take a look at. Factory tweeter is mounted right here, and it is a 2-screw mount. This guy right here. What we have to do is make this same shape that we can then attach our new tweeter to. Our tweeter isn't much bigger than the factory, but we can't pull this tweeter out of its bracket. For that, we're going to use some 1/8" plastic to fabricate that same shape and allow us to put our tweeter right back here where the factory one goes. Tweeter bracket was cut out, and then we went ahead and added foam to the side of it here, so that just like a fast string, but for a tweeter, it pushes all that energy into the door panel. We retain the 2 factory screws. We have our clip right here to go into the car. So with the foam, the wiring, and the tweeter clip installed, that finishes the wiring on this side. We have this done. Let's marriage the two together. This was the area of concern right here. We had to make sure that that crossover fit perfectly into this gap. There's only about a 1/2 inch of play there for this to be mounted on. See, it clears the crossover. Next, what we want to do is mount the amplifier. To do that, we need to come out with a panel that it can attach into this side structure here. The other nice thing about mounting it here is that all our power wires, speaker wires are all going that direction, so they can easily be terminated into the car, but the RCAs are going to be sticking out this way. So we want to make sure we get this as far forward as possible, and that what we make sticks out far enough to protect the RCAs from getting bumped. Located behind this is really nothing. This is all open right here. Our wiring will be able to just come into here and then up into the side. What I'm thinking we're gonna do is what we like to call a sandwich mount. A sandwich mount is where we take 2 pieces of plastic, one on the outside that it's gonna attach to and one on the inside, and then we screw the 2 of them together because this panel isn't gonna go anywhere. I wanna make sure that the panel goes all the way to the floor, but it has this 1/2 inch piece of floor mat that's in the way. We'll have to route or groove into our panel so that it tucks in behind this. So I'm gonna go cut a piece of 10 by 16 1/2 inch Centra. We have our 10 by 16 panel here, and we need to get it into the car so we can test fit it. However, I want to be able to carve an arc in here that matches the way the car is set up. The problem is we need to put a groove here in the bottom so that it'll slide into the carpet. It needs to be about 3/4 to about 1 inch. I've gone ahead and put the rabbiting bit into the router, and now we'll go ahead and make our adjustments. We want to start out a little bit lower. We're going to make 2 passes. Take it over and test fit it into the car. Floor mat turns right here. This is sitting on, so I need to actually remove this whole portion of it right there. Trace the carpet. And then we'll just go over to our scroll saw, cut that out. And I also want to round these 2 corners here so it looks a little prettier. We have our completed panel. Let's go put it in the car, and we'll make our back panel to mount it in place. On the back side for that back piece of plastic, we used 1/4" ABS. And it's in there really nice. Go ahead and take this back out, get the amplifier wired up onto it. When installing this amplifier, it has a unique feature on it that is not exactly installer friendly. The way the power wire comes out of the amplifier comes out at an angle. Well, when you screw an amplifier down, the power wire needs to come out flat. That's a problem, because now we have to put this steep arc here in this, or we have to drill holes in here and have the wire immediately exit. What we do to combat that is we add risers to the amplifier to actually lift it up a little bit and get it off of the panel, so that we add in that extra 1/2 inch for that wire to turn. Now the nice thing about that is that also gives it a little bit of extra air behind the amplifier, as well as in this case the RCAs can be tunneled underneath the amplifier and out of the way around the top and side, because we have very little room here and here. Before we screw the amplifier down, we're going to take our RCA, in this case it's a 6-channel RCA, and prep it for this installation. This particular RCA has a front rear sub indicator here, as well as connect to source unit tag, and then the same on the other end other than the source unit tag. All of this is going to be mounted underneath here or in a sleeving, so we're not going to be able to see that. What we do is we add in colored heat shrink to match the same color as the speaker wire. White is driver's front, gray is passenger front, green and purple. We add those onto our wire. And now it's extremely obvious which RCA is which. So our RCA is prepped and ready to install onto our amplifier board. Now prepping an RCA for this type of installation involves shielding the ends, as well as covering the whole length of the cable that's going to pass through the car to protect it all the way up into the end that goes by the radio itself. The one thing I like about this particular RCA cable is that if you'll notice, it's flat. Very flat. So that's going to make running it through the car super easy, as well as underneath this amplifier. This RCA is going to run right down the center of the amplifier. What we want to do is we want to drill holes here for us to attach zip ties to hold this all in place. Once we have the length determined, I'll pull the zip tie tight. The head of the zip tie, where it goes, depends on how the panel is going to mount down. In this particular case, it's going to be mounting flat up against something. I don't want the head of the zip tie mounted to the back of this panel. It won't necessarily pull flush like we want it to into the carpet. Putting them so the heads are facing up will be fine. The other thing I want to think about too is where this RCA needs to come out of this board. Do I need it to come out right here? Power wire is going to be running this direction, and I'm probably going to just drill a hole here for the power wire to go straight through. I might want it to snake and come out up here, because I plan to run these up at an angle and into the car this way. If they come out towards here, that might be a better place for them as opposed to down here. It's one of those things you want to spend some time thinking about before you actually start drilling holes, is how this is all going to sit in the car itself. So I needed to do this shape right here and come out here at this top. So this side of the amplifier is totally complete and ready to go. I don't know how they set this amplifier up, but we're just set it the way we would normally prep an amplifier if it was brand new out of the box. And that is turn the gains all the way down and set our crossovers at 80 Hertz front and rear. Now that we have the signal done, we're gonna move on to the power side. And for that, we went ahead and drilled a hole here. We've insulated every inch of the wire with the flexible loom. It's all gonna pass through a hole here. Now once this gets into the car, we'll cut a hole in the same exact spot, and that will allow the wire to S-bend in. There won't be any tight spots or anything like that. The only thing we have left to do on the amplifier is get the subwoofer wire made up, as well as tie in our remote turn on and our speaker wires. This amplifier has the screw down style terminals that bite into the wire. To protect our wire, we're going to go ahead and use ferrules, which is a sleeving for the wire. The other thing we want to do on this end, the wire is going to come out and turn. We want to cut one wire shorter than the other. This tool is designed to to compress the ferrule onto the wire, so it gives it a nice tight crimp. That'll go in and it's gonna come straight across underneath the power wire into the car. But we're gonna dress this wire up as well. On the end that's gonna be at the subwoofer, we add a piece of custom heat shrink that has our logo on it, and of course we make it obvious which one is positive and which one is negative. Our slight shorter L bend here is all set and ready to get screwed into the amplifier, as well as I went ahead and drilled in the holes for the zip ties. Like we said earlier, speed wire is a 9-conductor wire. It has a solid and a stripe of each pair, gray, white, green, purple, as well as our remote turn on. When doing this, we need to make sure that our remote turn on is longer than the speaker wires, because it has the farthest distance to travel over to the input on the amplifier here. That looks about the right length for it. Now the ends that are going to be exposed, we're going to twist them into place, and we're also going to put some blue loom over the remote turn on. Because there's 9 wires and they're all going spinning through here, at the end here, before you put your last piece of shrink wrap over it, you want to make sure that they're all lined up the way they need to go into the amplifier. So this amplifier goes left, right, left, right. So that's going to be gray, white, purple, green. The wire in the amplifier now is done. Let's take a closer look at it. The fast wire is mounted into place along with our RCAs and bass knob controller. They go up in, left, right, left, right. Our sub wires are in. Now these are just pushed in the holes. They're not actually screwed in yet. We have to do our gain adjustment still, so we're gonna be pulling these out. And with these tiny screws, even though we have the ferrules on there, they dig in really hard. I wanna wait and make sure that the last thing we do is tighten up the screws on these. Power wire is all set and ready to go. Sub wire out. The remote turn on is zip tied in. We need to get this into the car. Amplifier is mounted. One of the really nice things about taking the panels off of the car and having access to everything that's hidden behind them is this right here, factory ground point. We wouldn't have been able to see that with this panel attached, as we can attest to them having all these grounds, which we did go ahead and cover up so they won't have to worry about them leaking into the car. That means we could shorten up our ground wire, attach it right here to the factory ground. We're also going to go ahead and get all our other wires running forward into the car. So as we said for the battery, we want to make sure that it's mounted firmly in place. We don't want it to be falling around like it was previously. How we're going to do that, down here is the bolt for the factory bracket. We've removed that, which allows us to take a piece of 1/4-inch ABS, and we're going to make an L bend in it down here at the bottom that's going to rest into that, and then this piece will come up high enough to where we can mount our fuse holder right here. This is the panel that holds the battery in place. We want to make sure we make our plastic that can sit on this and use that same screw. What we did is we thinned out the ABS here on the bottom. We took it down to an 1/8 inch, and then we've heated it up for us to mold this into it just like this. This is going to screw directly into the battery. Ground wire is attached to the factory ground point. The wires are all zip tied into place, and then they split off here and go across the car there. And the power wire and the bass knob are coming up here forward. We've started to put the back of the car back together. Fernando's getting the power wire up through the firewall. We completed the fuse holder. The really cool thing about this particular fuse holder is that it comes off of the mount. That makes servicing it easy too. They need to remove this panel, take this off. They don't have to do anything to the fuse holder. We had to go to this bolt to attach it. If you recall, this was the bolt that they had used to attach their power wire. That is a V-shaped bolt, meaning the bottom of it is shaped like this. And how it works is as it tightens down into the mount, it pulls together the battery clamp and tightens itself onto the battery. When you put a ring terminal underneath that, it can't pull down as much as it needs to, and you're going to have a loose battery connection. Now that we're nearing the end of the install, we taped up the part of the harness we had to fix so that it looks more factory. We have our RCAs in the dash, went ahead and connected our speed wire into the harness. Now it's just a matter of plugging everything in. scan over your harness as well as into the dash just to make sure everything is connected and ready to go. Push on the 1/8 inch, make sure they're plugged in. We've gone ahead and also moved the steering wheel control interface over here to the side so that we can put this back in. And once we get this screwed into place, we won't have to worry about pulling the radio in and out. There's a harness that attaches into the top of the radio here. We want to make sure that we have access to that. Everything at this point should be plugged in and ready to play. We have a bunch of testing we need to do to verify everything that we've put in. The first of which is making sure all the functions on the radio do what they're supposed to do. Put it in reverse. We can see the ceiling, test our steering wheel features. Call Fernando.
Calling Fernando Lopez.
Now what we're going to do is move into some of the audio tests we need to do. We need to do a polarity test to make sure that everything is functioning properly. This does not have a CD player, so we're going to be using our phone to do that. We have a pop sound already recorded into it. What this is going to do is it's going to flash green or red, telling us how this is connected. So we have green, green, red. That's exactly what we're looking for. Green, green, red as well. Another nice thing about doing the polarity test is you physically have to go around and check every speaker to make sure there's sound coming out of it. At the beginning of your testing, you immediately know what's going on. So now that we know all the speakers are moving in the right direction, we can move on to gain setting the amplifier. There's a couple different ways to do that, and we have a tool to do it any way we need. We have a DD1, we have a DD1 Plus. We have 2 different handheld oscilloscopes if needed. Then we also have a giant benchtop 7-inch screen oscilloscope. For this install though, the DD1 will be fine for what we're trying to do. You're doing any form of single note playing. In this case, we're going to play 1000 Hertz, 0 dB. Make sure all your speakers are disconnected. Disconnect them here at the amplifier, not somewhere else down the line. It's a good way to burn stuff up. For this, we're going to start out with a 0 dB 1000 Hertz test track. And we're going to turn it up and see where the radio is clipping at. And that'll illuminate this little guy here and tell us. Turn it up, and we have it highlighted here. Now what we want to try to do is be able to turn the radio all the way up.
It's all the way up.
And it's all the way up. Bonus, thank you. Now we'll play a 0 dB 40 Hertz test track and see if we can achieve the same thing. All right, we have signal. We have 40 Hertz detected.
All the way up.
This radio is not clipping at max volume. Play a negative 5 dB at 40 Hertz, and we're gonna set the gain to that. What we're looking for is that red light right there at the top coming on. We don't want that to happen, so we're gonna set our, so that just barely comes, so it doesn't come on. We're gonna do the same for the 1000 Hertz track on both front and rear. Our gains are set. While I'm screwing the speakers in, Fernando's gonna go ahead and grab that sheet of paper from the beginning of the video. Remember this guy right here? He's gonna get that seat put back in place. Now that we have all the measurements we need to put in the time delay adjustments on the radio, we're also going to want to tweak the EQ a little bit. Sure, we could just settle for powerful or super bass or something like that, but it's got adjustment. We should use them. To do adjustments on this, you're gonna need some form of an RTA. For this, we're just gonna use this guy right here. Audio Controls iTest Mic. It's a simple microphone-based RTA that plugs right into an iPad, such as this guy right here. It's not the only RTA we have though. We have 3 handheld RTAs, as well as an Audio Frog RTA that plugs into a laptop. We have the old school big guy Audio Control Classic sitting in a box up there. And the reason why it's sitting in a box up there, we really don't need it anymore. We have this guy, the DM-RTA. And this one isn't actually the functioning one. This is the beta. We were actually part of the beta test on it. The actual DM-RTA is sitting right here charging its battery. Now, as you can tell, I'm not somebody that just wants to have one of something. We did run into a situation where we screwed up a software update on our DM-RTA, and because it's become such an integral part of our tune, we have a second DM-RTA on standby ready to go. It's what we do for a living, so we should have all the tools we need in order to do the job correctly. Let's hop into this car and get this thing tuned up. We need to go in and enter all those values first, and while we're doing that, because it is a hot day, we will go ahead and run the air conditioner, but once we actually get to the tune part, we're going to shut that off, as well as the engine. This one has a 9-band parametric EQ. It's not as good as, let's say, a full DSP EQ, but it is pretty nice.
come from a single point in the center of your soundstage.
So those are the test tracks that we play anytime we get into a car, whether we're doing something as basic as a radio install or we're doing something full complex DSP, crazy multi-channel system. We play the same song every time. It's annoying. We really don't like it much anymore, but we know exactly how it's supposed to sound. We know where the instruments come from. We can hear them. It sounds wonderful. Now, normally what we do at this point is we've worked all day. We've had this wonderful time. We like to go ahead, start up the car, forget about the mics, forget about everything, and just listen to the music. That's the best part of the day, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
It's kind of our little reward. Well, I can tell you right now, this guy is going to be freaking out once we get him in here and let him listen to this. Now, one other thing that we did, and I'm gonna go grab him here, but one other thing we did that I wanted to point out, we've gone ahead and located the Pioneer bass knob right here into the factory panel, so it looks really nice.
Hello everyone, my name is Bill Freeman. I'm with MAG Sales. I'm the territory manager here in Tampa, Florida, and I would like to tell you about a great installer. This installer is Dean Beyett. Dean is one of the best at his craft, and that craft is installation. He is meticulous and borderline OCD. He studies everything about every product, and his technical knowledge is unsurpassed by anyone I've ever met. He is also a giver, one that takes many hours out of the day to promote, teach, mentor worldwide with his 5-star car stereo show.
It's that fun moment. You ready?
Yeah.
Did you hear it?
I did hear it.
You excited?
I'm very excited.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, come on back. Let's take a look at the trunk first.
All right.
And we'll show you what we did there. So as we talked about, we have the woofers with the grills, so you can put all your stuff in it. We'll be putting that box in there when we're done.
Awesome.
The amplifier's mounted to the side panel here, firmly, nice, and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's clean.
Okay.
It's awesome.
Let's go ahead and we'll take a look at the fuse holder underneath the hood. We made a new fuse holder mount, like we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
And one thing I wanted to point out, did you ever see where they were screwed into?
I actually did not know.
Okay, so they were actually screwed into what is known as a V-bolt. And how a V-bolt works is as you tighten it up, the V pulls the battery tighter.
Right.
Okay, well they had put a ring terminal underneath it. So this was gonna be loose.
Gotcha.
So that really sucks.
Yes.
Yeah. We had to go to this bolt, which is the safe bolt to go to.
Okay.
The one cool thing is you can still get to this. This just unclips like this, and you get to the bolt for your battery, so you can pull this all out.
Okay.
It's actually heat formed to the bracket that's holding the battery in place.
Okay.
So when you pull that bolt out, you can take the battery out. This can sit just like this, put it all back in, and then just snap it back in place.
That's pretty awesome.
All right, watch your fingers. Let's close the hood. Let's hop in and take a listen.
All right.
Playing music like that, as you were saying, it's
oh, totally. You can hear them hitting all, like, we're, you know,
yeah,
it's
cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Awesome. Thank you guys.
Oh no, you're welcome.
Thank you guys.
You guys know. In this particular install, we didn't use any smart harnesses to install with the radio. It was a standard harness. Let's take a look at a vehicle that is a little bit different than that. Something with the new basic style radio installation.
Hi, I'm Lori Boyer, Regional Sales Manager for Kicker Performance Audio. When I think of Dean, the first word that pops into my mind is passionate. He is so passionate about so many aspects of the 12-volt industry. It shows through in the knowledge that he has of the product lines, the understanding that he has of the technologies of all of these different product lines that have had to evolve because of the car manufacturers and what it takes these days to install in a vehicle. The quality of jobs that he does, he's passionate about doing it right the first time, helping to educate others to be able to do it right the first time. And that's one of the main things that when I think of Dean and his passions, he has a passion for mentoring people that I haven't seen in too many people. He wants to create an interest and an enthusiasm and get people excited about audio again. He has a passion for mentoring his coworker. He has a passion for mentoring the consumer base. Anybody who's watching or listening, he wants them to learn and to understand and to get excited again about audio. His mentoring of sales manager and industry personnel, helping us to understand what it's like for the installer, what it's like for the customer, what it's like for the store owner. That's passionate for him, for us to understand, because he wants this industry to grow again, to quit declining. It's just so difficult to explain how important somebody like Dean is for our industry, because we are an emotional industry. His passion for the products, for the job that he does to bring this industry back to what it has been in the past, is why I feel like he deserves this industry award. Thank you.
So what we're working on is a 2011 GMC Sierra. And what we're doing with this is what we used to do a ton of, and that is a basic radio upgrade. Now I use the term basic very loosely because nowadays it's not so basic. So in the past, all you'd have to do is buy a simple harness like this. It would have your speaker wires, your power antenna turn on, illumination, all the basic things that's required to put a radio in the car. But then that all changed. Now the radio has become an integral part of the vehicle. And in doing so, it's changed the way we do installations. Now we need big harnesses like this that have modules on the back. And there's a couple interface manufacturers out there. Depending on the situation you run into, one of those harnesses may be better for the installation. Talking with the customer is key to that and figuring out what they want. So for example, something like an iData harness is if you want to add features in, such as tire pressure, doors being open, check engine light reset. If they're just looking for a integration that's nice and simple and they're not going to be using anything like that, well then you have PAC and you have Access. When making a sale to do an installation like this, you need to talk with the customer and figure out what it is they want to retain that's factory and what they want to add that's aftermarket, a new feature that they're unfamiliar with. In this particular vehicle, he has steering wheel controls that have cell phone functionality such as answer and voice. Now up in the mirror, he has OnStar controls. Some of these are going to have backup cameras, some cars are going to have aux jacks and USBs as well. Some of them have factory GPS. They're just old and not functioning anymore, so they're going to have a GPS antenna. Some have Sirius Xm that they want to retain. You need to know, do I need to add a module to retain that? All these things are something to consider now when we're doing that basic radio swap. The reason for that is some of these are going to need extra parts to do that. Now as far as features go for an aftermarket radio, right now the two hot features are CarPlay and Android Auto. Most people that are wanting to do upgrades from their basic radio like this ad are adding one of those two features. Fortunately, both are available on a single unit. Talking with the customer is what's going to help us fill in all the other blanks. It's also nice to know before you get started if they do have an Android or an iPhone because of how the two have to integrate. Android phones are a lot more picky over the USB than an Apple device is. We have to approach it a little bit differently when we're deciding what we're going to do with the USB and whether we can retain the factory USB location or not. Now after talking with this customer, we came up with a game plan. He's not interested in DVDs or CDs, so that immediately put us into a mechaless unit, meaning there's no spinning physical media. He does want to do Apple CarPlay, and he's not interested in retaining his OnStar, but he does want his steering wheel controls, and he's not interested in his Sirius XM. Knowing all that, harness we're going to use is the PAC Audio RP4 GM31. But just because a harness manufacturer says it'll do something doesn't necessarily mean it will. Vehicles change, there's different iterations on the plug. So one of the things we always do is test. So we're going to hop into the vehicle right now with our harness and make sure it's doing everything it's supposed to. So we have the module. Grab a digital multimeter and we'll go ahead and set it to volts DC. For this, we're going to be testing positive, so we need to put our black test lead into the ground. The wires in question aren't the standard yellow, red, and whatnot. It's the accessory wires, such as the reverse trigger, the VSS, amp turn-ons, and all those triggers like that. And the reason why we're testing for this, not so much that we know the module isn't going to do it, it's that sometimes these colors might not necessarily be correct. So we'll go ahead and turn on the car, put it in reverse. So if you'll notice, this is making a chime sound. This gives us the ability to figure out how loud that is and where we're going to want to put that so that the customer can hear it, because if the car has backup sensors, he's going to need to make sure he can hear that chime sound. According to our instructions, the green wire is going to be our reverse. Right now we have 12 volts and it's not on. So that's telling me that more than likely it's not that. Go ahead and push in the emergency brake. We just lost voltage. Undo it. and we got it back. What that's telling me is that this harness was probably updated and the instructions weren't, because purple white is the normal color for reverse. Now we'll go ahead and fast forward to the purple white, and we see the 12 volts. Now, having relationships with companies like PAC and iData have allowed us to know and communicate when things like this arise. We knew that PAC was going to have an update like this coming down. We've communicated with them that, hey, we're seeing some of these in the field where the owner's manuals aren't correct. And they're like, we've been getting reports of that. One of their vendors updated something and they didn't update these. So now you're in that gray area of you should just check it before you put it in. Better to be safe at the beginning than have to change it once you've got it all built and you're putting it back together. Another thing that we're gonna test in this is whether it has an amplified system or not. It's because just because it doesn't say like Bose or Bang & Olufsen or Sony or any one of those popular name brands, it still may have a basic factory amplified system. After all, it does have a set of tweeters on the dash, and in some cases is an indication of an amplifier on some of these older vehicles. It's a simple enough test also. Now in this particular harness, it has a set of RCAs, and the idea is that if it has the amplified system, you can just plug these into the preamps of the radio, and if it doesn't, you can just go ahead and cut these off. It's very nice to save these for later applications as well. Now we can take our tone generator, turn it on, and if we get tone with nothing else hooked up, that's telling us that there is no amplifier in it. If we weren't getting tone at that point, what we could do is simply go ahead and power up the remote turn-on wire, the blue-white in the harness, turn the ignition on, repeat the test. If we have tone at that point, then that's telling us that there is some form of amplifier in here, at which case we'll go back to our instruction manual and see if there's any notes or caveats like that that we need to know about integrating with it. Such as some vehicles, you just use front, left, and right. Some vehicles, the rear outputs are actually the amplifier inputs. Now, whether you've done this truck a million times or this is your first time doing it, you kind of want to always approach it from the same thing. No two trucks are always the same, no two cars are always the same, and no two harnesses, though we'd love it to be, are always the same. The plan is to head over to the workbench and go ahead and integrate in the harness. Now that we know the right colors that we'll be using, it's going to be simple enough to do that. For this particular vehicle, it has the factory USB located here in the dash, which is easy enough for us to retain. We use the PAC Audio USB GM1. However, because it's going back into the car and it's going to get bumped around and abused and whatnot, we go ahead and we put a piece of heat shrink over it to lock it in place. You just want to go ahead and let that cool. Once it cools, it'll get nice and hard and it'll be stuck there. Don't put this back into the dash while it's still hot. This is still gummy, so it will move. You always want to wait till your heat shrink is nice and cool. You should be able to grab it and not feel any heat. Now we've also installed in the second USB. This USB on this particular radio is used for hard drives. We've gone ahead and installed that into the glove box because hard drives are typically big and you will need some storage. All these we route through. We also put a flexible loom over it as well as heat shrink on the end to finish it off. We have our logo on it as well, so if anybody's going through the glove box, they'll know who put it in. That covering is protecting the wire while it runs in through the dash. As you can see, it comes all the way up here in the dash and is also zip tied in place so that you just can't pull it out. Most harnesses from manufacturers are going to come prepped like this to where they've gone ahead and added in a couple pieces of tape and they're like, hey, everything is here, go ahead and attach to it. Now, I'm not necessarily a fan of that. I remove all that tape and I'm going to design the harness the way I feel it's going to fit into the car best. Typically that involves breaking the two harnesses apart a little bit further than they would do because sometimes they are separated in the dash more. I also like making sure that my smart module is a far enough distance away because sometimes this has to get tucked into places because the dashes are super tight. If we need to, then at the end here we'll go ahead and extend some of these wires so that they all come to a point further away. I like my harness to be a little bit longer than it comes. I just don't feel it gives us enough flexibility. When the harness is completed, like this one here, we have enough length to where we can tee this into the car, bury this where it needs to go. The steering wheel integration is going to plug into the back of the radio. One of the other things that we do anytime we're upgrading into a car is we add these three wires here. One is a remote turn on, and then we add an accessory and ground. This is a big pickup truck, and right now he doesn't have a factory backup camera or an aftermarket backup camera. But that's not to say that one day he won't. He might want to add that at some point. It might not have been in the budget at this time. So we always add those two extra wires. When we were in the car testing the wire to make sure it was having reverse, even though we didn't put in a backup camera, we were going to go ahead and connect those wires together for that same purpose. We don't want to have to pull this harness apart to do something as simple as connecting the reverse wire. If we decide decides to upgrade to aftermarket amplifiers, well, that's another story. We can go ahead and pull the tape off for that. And speaking of tape, Tessa tape seems to be the joy and very fun tape that everyone is using now because it retains that factory look in the dash. The factory has Tessa tape all over its wires, so making our harness look like this adds for a little bit cleaner install. The one thing we found is there are two types of Tessa tape. There's the interior and there's the exterior. Living here in Florida, the interior, like that stuff there, the fuzzy kind, it doesn't do so well. It heats up and it turns to goo. We tape all our harnesses using exterior grade Tessa tape, which holds up a lot better in this heat. Once you get everything plugged into the back of the radio, take a second and just mentally go over what you've plugged in, specifically like the Bluetooth mic or any steering wheel controls or anything, because those typically use the same size inputs. And of course, make sure that you plugged it in general. So just kind of like look at the back of the radio, check your front rear RCAs if you're using them. If you added a backup camera, make sure you plug that in. Now that we have everything plugged in, we want to check one other thing. That is the steering wheel control interface, and make sure it's mapped properly. Because once we put this in the dash, we're not going to be able to get to that module. Turn the car on and plug it in our phone. Now what we're hoping for at this point is that the green icon in the center here lights up telling us the CarPlay works. Now we're going to push to talk on there and see if that works. It went to attenuate, which means that the push to talk feature is not programmed properly. For that, we'll go ahead and reprogram it. We still have the instruction manuals in the car from our previous test, which is where we like to leave them so we know where they're at. We'll turn to our Kenwood section and we'll easily remap them. Now it's nice if you have a helper for this so that you can keep an eye on the light and hit the button while they touch the steering wheel controls. On this steering wheel, we basically have volume up and down on the back, track up and down on the front, along with answer and hang up, push to talk, and source. Answer and hang up are dual function, which we can keep, and then we have this little button here, which is like a play pause. Depending on what we want to do, if it has pictures, it's easier just to keep it the way it was. We can use this as a secondary feature because we have a lot to choose from. Volume up, volume down, skip source, skip track up, track down, FM, skip voice style, press and hold, on hook, disconnect, press and hold, answer, press, mute, preset. Now that it's programmed, let's go ahead and make sure it works. The easiest way to do that is to test the VR feature because this is the last feature on the set. So if you've got that right, chances are good you've got the rest of them right. So that's gonna be a press to hold. What's the weather like today?
It's currently clear and 87 degrees.
We've tested volume up and down. We'll go ahead and test track. So all our functions are working on the steering wheel. Turn the car back off. When running your wires into the dash, the radio should sit flush onto these screws without having to push it in place, meaning there should be very little resistance pushing it back out. You shouldn't have to be like onto it. It's not necessary. If it does that, then you need to go ahead and pull the radio back out and readjust the wiring harness accordingly so that this goes in with minimal effort. And the reason for that is if you have to push really hard, chances are good one of the harnesses or the USB or something like that is getting pinched. That means this is going to come back for service and you really don't want that. So you want it to go back in just like this factory air conditioning goes back in. Well, you literally just have to push it into place, hold it, someone screws it in. Now one last test we're going to do on this one because we had to unplug it in order to use our USB because this uses a micro USB interface here. Is we're going to plug our phone back in and make sure that it still functions. Our CarPlay logo is highlighted here. That means it's working. We can button the rest of this dash back up. Once you get this all put back together, you've been touching the corners and you bumped it with your arm. The screen is typically nasty. You don't want to deliver a car like that when you're done. So we actually buy screen cleaners to clean off all our fingerprints before we deliver it to the customer. Now these are specially made for touch panel displays. They're made by a company called Bello. So this is also helpful too on some of these dashes that have super shiny piano finish dashes. We'll go ahead and clean the whole thing so that when we hand it back to them, they can put their fingerprints on it and ours aren't there. So that was a basic radio install by today's standards. Yes, there's a lot of work that you have to do just to do a basic radio install. But what if we can't take that radio out? What if we want to do a system in here and that was a super sexy factory radio that had CarPlay, that had Android Auto, that had an 8-inch touchscreen? You know, we're not going to be taking that out. Well, that takes us to the next car we're going to take a look at.
Hey, Dean and Fernando, William Berg coming at you live from my electronics lab. Wanting to thank you for all the video content that you put out. It's always so informative, and we get to learn about all the new products that are coming out, sometimes a little before we're supposed to know about them. And Dean, we're definitely shooting for you to win at both the categories. You deserve it, and you're a great installer and great at what you do and teaching us something new all the time. Keep up the good work and keep the videos coming. Always look forward to seeing the next one. Thank you.
So now we have a 2015 Mustang GT with the shaker audio system. And what that means, in the door here, it's got a 6-inch mid-bass, it's got a 3-inch mid-range, it's got a tweeter located up here in the A-pillar. As far as factory systems go, this one is awesome because it gives us the ability to do maximum upgrade. We can add in a full 3-way set. But one of the things that we're not going to be doing is replacing this radio. This has a really nice big factory touchscreen in it. It's got Bluetooth, it's got USB, the air conditioner's integrated into it, all the car tech is integrated into it. So that means we have to do integration into it. So thankfully the companies we've talked about previously, they make solutions for this as well. Though we can't rely on those all the time, which we'll talk about in a little bit, we're gonna go to those websites and we're gonna check to see what they list for those. And in this case, we had a hit. iData had just come out with a solution for this to add in their partnership piece, the DSR1. Now the DSR1 is a partnership between iData and Rockford Fosgate. It uses the iData AR interface with the Rockford 360 software. And what makes it really cool is it's all controlled from a tablet device. So we can put an iPad in here and we can control everything. The reason why it's in here today is because we need to do a software update. These products, because they're integrating with factory and they have to do a lot of factory things, sometimes you get it in and it does strange things. In this case, this one keeps kicking out the subwoofer. You could unplug the volume knob, plug it back in, and it'll reset. Turns out Rockford is aware of it. They've gone ahead and pushed an update. Now anytime we do one of these, we automatically update it for the most recent firmware. This is a beta firmware that hasn't been released yet, but they went ahead and sent him. He brought it to us so that we could do the update. Let's take a look and see what we put in here. This car has a full cal front end in that we use the Access 3-way components up front along with a set of Access coaxials in the rear. We've made a custom mount for the crossovers that are located with the DSR1. Once we get to that, I'll show you what we did. In the back, we're using an Audio Control LC 4.800 to power those, as well as his supplied XTR 1500 watt amp. The amplifier is stable to 1 ohm, but the 10 we're running is only 2 ohm. If he wants to in the future, he can go ahead and add a second 10. Right now, he's perfectly happy with the 110. He's had it in here for about 3 or 4 months. When doing a spare tire mount like this, you'll notice that there's no wiring ran anywhere along here. All of our wiring runs to the back of the car first. We have all our signal coming up this side, and it goes and it zip ties into the factory harness that runs along through here. Now we remove all the side panels and everything to tie into the factory harness, and then our power runs along the other side of the car up behind this panel and through here. The reason why we do it this way as opposed to the shortest distance or going forward like that is because the trunk cover, this guy right here, when it slides into place, it sits on top of that area right there. When we set the box on top of it, if there was a power wire anywhere along here, the weight of the subwoofer and the friction from it moving just a little bit here and there is going to wear through the shielding. Naturally, that wouldn't be good. We could build like risers on the box or do something along those, but then if he ever changed the box without us knowing, he would run into that problem. So the safest thing to do is just do it right the first time, follow along that factory wiring harness. Floor sill removed, there's this channel right here, and what you can kind of see here is the factory wiring harness. This channel comes out of the car, and we can actually integrate our wiring into that so that you don't even know it's there. We tape or sleeve every single wire that passes through the car. You're not going to see an RCA. You might see some tape, but that's about it. Now for the reason why the car is actually here, is updating the DSR1. One of the nice things about the AR technology, which makes it different from an Amp Pro, is that it allows you to take out the factory amplifier. And in this case, that gives us a lot of space. Take the factory amp out, make a new bracket, put the DSR1 and the crossovers right there. The difference between that and an Amp Pro is an Amp Pro, if we were to keep any of the factory system having to play, like if he was going to build a system and just put a subwoofer in, the Amp Pro would be better geared for that. Let's hop in and take a look at it. In this car, the factory amplifier is located in the driver's kick panel right here. which allowed us to make this double stack amp mount. And on the outside, you can see where we've installed the crossovers. And then in the cubby hole here is where the DSR1 is. So just like the factory amplifier is removable, we actually used the factory amplifier mounting bracket to make our panel. We can easily take out the 3 screws that's secured in place and do our update. Once the update is done, we'll go ahead and mount it all back into place and give it a test to make sure everything is operating the way it should. Tells me now my update is done. I've been talking long enough. Close out the application, and like I said, we'll get it mounted back up in place.
Hey guys, this is Johnny with Loud and Clear. I'm voting for Dean for both Install of the Year and Trusted Tech because he's a very reliable person. He makes great videos to educate not only installers but also customers so that they're able to ask for specific products and we are able to use the issues that he's found in the real world and apply it to our own bays. And can't wait to see you guys in Dallas.
Now, anytime you're gonna do any form of integration into the radio, you wanna pull the radio out of the dash. That is, unless you're just gonna do something simple like add a basic high level to low level to add some subwoofers, you can tap that in the rear. We're not doing that with this car. We need to do full integration. We have a highs amp, we have a sub amp, so we need everything. Let's get the radio out of the dash. If you do have this particular Honda, to get this out, there's 2 screws that are in the pocket here that removes the pocket. There's 2 screws on the bottom here, and then there's 2 screws up here that hold the radio in. Once those are out, this will go ahead and come out. If you need help getting your particular radio out, you can go to sites like pack-audio.com or metroonline.com, search for the dash kit for your car, and those instructions will be there, and they'll show you how to get your radio out. Now, anytime you take a radio out of the dash, it's always nice to have a towel or some cloth around, because you're gonna have to pull this out, lean it forward, and unplug a bunch of harnesses. You don't wanna scratch any of the plastics around it. Once you have your radio all secured, all the corners are covered, and everything is not going to get scratched, because you're going to be here for a while. You want to make sure that everything is protected. You're going to want to find the main wiring harness. Now in this case, it's this guy right here. Now for those of you that are Honda owners and you disconnect that battery and it's looking for that password, make sure you have access to your password. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you're a Honda owner, find the password. Typically it's on a little business card in the owner's manual or stuck to the side of the glove box. We're going to need a couple tools. Your digital multimeter, you're going to need one of these. A tone generator is really nice to have. However, if you don't have a tone generator, a 9-volt battery with some wire attached to it will work in a pinch. What we need to know is where the speakers are. There's a couple different ways you can do that. For one, you can take a door off the car and you can continuity test between the speaker and the door and behind the radio. And to do that, you would simply just put your voltmeter to the cool little wavy lines down here in the bottom. And when the two make contact, it makes this sound. So what you would do is you would attach door and you go to each pin and individually see if you can get sound. Now we have that door off, so that's where we're gonna start. Now in that door, there's a yellow and a blue wire. We've gone ahead and attached to the yellow wire. What we wanna do is look at the harness and see if there is a yellow or blue wire. Now don't be afraid, in some cases, the wire will actually change colors between here and the boot and then in the door. So if it's not there, don't freak out too much. So this actually has a yellow and a blue wire, but they're substantially smaller than what's in the door over there. But we'll start with those two. Okay, so I'm not getting a tone on those. So now we'll proceed to testing the rest of these. It's as simple as just jumping from one to the next. We've tested them all and we don't get a tone. That's telling us that there's something between the radio and those speakers. So that means there might be an amplifier in this car or possibly some form of a crossover network between the radio and the speaker. The easiest thing to do is check for that said crossover network. Sometimes in like Volkswagens, they have big passive crossover networks. Typically those are mounted in the door where the speakers are, so you can kind of find them before you get started. You'll see it and you'll be like, oh, you can trace it back. In this case, it's a Honda. They typically don't have those on the door speakers, but they do have them on the tweeters, but we're not testing the tweeter right now. That can only mean one other thing, that there's an amplifier somewhere in this car. So now we want to go and check. If your car has some form of a subwoofer in it from the factory, chances are good there's going to be an amplifier in it. Not all, but some. For example, in like a Honda Pilot or a Ridgeline, the amplifier for the subwoofer is built into the radio. We wouldn't have this problem with those cars because the other amplifier, because there's so much room, is built into the radio also. So let's hop into the back of the car and we'll see if there's some form of a subwoofer. And that is a subwoofer. So the likelihood of this car having some form of an amplifier just went up a lot. For us, we have the car apart already, so it's gonna be a little less work for us to find it. However, for you that doesn't necessarily have the car apart, let's talk about some of the places where an amplifier might be. In a sedan, there are only a few because there's not that much room to hide things. Good place is this area here on the passenger side or the driver's side. However, the passenger side on Japanese cars is more popular. The driver's side on German cars is more popular. And on American cars, it's a crapshoot. They go all over the place. Another real popular place is in this kick panel. There's a couple of Dodges and Chryslers that have them there. And then up here tucked into the glove box area, Lexus likes to go up in this area. Some Audis have like a radio in the dash here. Toyota loves to go underneath the passenger seat. And then on the driver's side, which is a big one for Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, they like to go right here where that fuse box is. They'll put an amplifier up into the dash. Now Honda typically will put their amplifiers over there or here next to the radio. What we want to do is check in that general area because we've already got the back of the car apart for the install we're doing, so we can see that it's not there. The seats in this car are smashed to the floor, so the likelihood of it being there is thin. And there again, we've already taken out the glove box. You can see that it's not there. That just leaves next to the radio in the driver's compartment. To identify the amplifier, there's typically one sign, and that is the heatsink. Amplifiers are going to have some form of a heatsink. That's not to say that other products in the car aren't going to have a heat sink, because some do. When you're looking around, look for the heat sink. And in this case, right here next to the gas pedal is a big black heat sink. So there's a possibility that that could be the amplifier. Before we unplug it, there's a couple things we can check. One, we know in that door there's a blue-yellow wire. We know in the back that the subwoofer is a green-red wire. There's 4 wires that are going to be in this plug. So if we check this thing out and we see a blue-yellow and a green-red, there's a good possibility that this might be the amplifier. We could extend that to 8 wires if we wanted, if we grab the other 4 wires in the back for the rear speakers. If we can identify all those speaker colors in this harness, then we know this has to be the amplifier. So let's go ahead and take a look at it and see if we can see those wires. On this harness here, we see a red-green and we see a blue-yellow. Let's go ahead and unplug that. Now, since we have that door speaker still apart, we can go ahead and do that same continuity test with those wires and see if they meter here. Now our blue isn't metering, but let's keep going. There we go. That's the sound we're looking for. Looking at this, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's actually a gray wire in the harness, not the blue-yellow that are right here. A lot of the times what'll happen is they'll use the same color wiring for that side of the car, so the blue-yellow might actually be going to the tweeter in this case and not the speaker in the door. I know, right? It's fun. But we found the wire. Now we can go ahead and tone it and just verify that the sound is getting to that speaker. To do that, we'll use our tone generator. So that sound we're hearing is that speaker. Now you can do the same continuity test to figure out which other wire. So we tested on the top and we found out it was the gray, and then we tested on the bottom. Now we can go through and we can test all the wires. So the first 2 wires here up are gonna be the tweeter. That's gonna be the driver's door, the passenger door, the tweeter, a rear speaker, another rear speaker, and the subwoofer. So this one harness has all the speaker wires in it. We know a couple things now. We know that there is a dedicated tweeter wire. We know there's a dedicated mid-range wire. There's a sub wire. There's rear wires. What we want to do is figure out their polarity, meaning which of these wires is positive and negative. The easy way to do that is with some form of a polarity tester. If you don't have one of those, you can take your battery. There's a positive, there's a negative. Put the red on the positive, the black on the negative. And as you're tapping, if it moves out, you have red and black correctly. If it moves in, you have red and black wrong. Look on the other side of the harness to see which 2 wires were there, and that'll tell you which ones are positive and negative. And then repeat that for all of the speakers. Where you're gonna run into a problem is on the tweeter. You might not be able to see it move with your naked eye. For that, I do strongly recommend some form of polarity tester. You can still pop it with a battery and use some form of a handheld polarity tester because it is metering it. However, you can get something like this, a PT9A, that will do both. It has a microphone in the end, as well as generates power. So this is giving us a visual indicator, and it's picking up my voice, of positive negative. I'm getting a positive pulse. That means that the speaker is moving out, which means what I have pinned on this side is going to be the positive negative wires that I want to use if I'm going to use those outputs to feed something. Now to recap, all this information is important if we're putting in a high level to low level adapter. We know we have a tweeter, we have a mid-range, we have a rear, and we have a sub. Now if we're going to amplify all those channels, let's do some quick math. We have a tweeter, we have a mid-range. We're going to multiply those by 2 because remember there's 2 sides. For front we have 4 channels we need to bring together to create 2. Next we have the rear. That's going to be 6, and then a sub is going to make it 7. That means if you want to retain balance front rear all through the radio, you're going to need something that's going to take in 8 channels of sound. Now you can pick up something like an LC8i that will allow you to combine all of this together, so you'll be summing the front 2 channels and then the rear and the sub will be on their own, essentially creating 6 channels of output. The other part of this equation is figuring out what is feeding that amplifier, and that's key because there's a couple different ways to feed an amplifier. Over a data bus, in which case you want to look to see if there's some form of an Amp Pro or an AR that will plug into that and give you a preamp output. If it's a fixed level output, meaning what's coming out of the radio is fixed, it's non-variable, in which case you're going to be going after the amplifier unless you want to put in some form of a volume knob. There may also be other stuff coming over different channels that are being mixed into the amplifier, like backup sensors and Bluetooth and navigation and stuff like that. So sometimes that doesn't always work, in which case you're going to go after the amplifier and do summing. The one thing that is really cool is sometimes you'll find out the amplifier has variable voltage output. Now variable voltage output is the exact same thing that's coming out of a preamp section, meaning it goes up and down with the volume knob and it's at a low voltage. We want to check for that because Hondas sometimes have that, and if it does, that will make this a lot easier of an install because at that point we just need RCAs, or we need something that takes a low level variable voltage input. Now to test for that, we're going to need, there again, a digital multimeter or some form of an RTA so that we can actually physically see the signal. We're also going to need a pink noise test track that can be played through the radio. For that, this has a CD player, so we'll do it over CD. You can also use your phone, it doesn't matter. So let's go ahead and we'll unplug that other plug that's on the amplifier. Now a lot of the times those variable voltage cables, just like an RCA, will have some form of shielding over them. So cutting back the tape and exposing just a little bit further down the line like we've done here, we can see which ones are our twisted pairs. And there's 4 of them, which is really getting to be a better and better sign of what we're looking for. So we have a pink noise track playing here. Volume control is right there. We're going to come in here and grab our first pair of wires, plug in. We'll use the RTA first because it gives us a really good graphical representation of what we want to see. Put the volume up, we can see that it increases. As we put the volume down, we can see that it decreases. The other thing that we want to look at here is, see, pink noise is really nice in that it's our flat response that we're looking for. And this is a nice flat response. That means that there's very little equalization coming through this. Most of it's done in the amplifier. That's what we're looking for. The RTA isn't something that everyone has in their toolbox. What we want to do is use a digital multimeter set to AC. It's going to be the V with the little wavy line above it right here. Now that's going to give us an output voltage that as we turn up the volume, the numbers will increase. And as we turn down, obviously it will decrease. Now that'll tell us what is variable voltage. As you can see, the RTA will give us that extra information of what the actual sound looks like coming out of the radio. Now we're in a different place than we were a couple minutes ago when we just knew what was coming out of the amplifier. We knew we had 7 speakers coming out of the amplifier, but now we know we have a variable voltage output coming out of the radio. We can do that test to the other 4 leads, and we can use the balance and fader to fade to each corner of the car, and that'll tell us which one is driver's, passenger rear, driver's rear, and we can write that information down. What it's not going to tell us though is what is the positive wire coming out of the radio, what is the negative wire coming out of the radio. If we get that wrong, then we'll have a signal polarity change and it'll be weird. The next thing we need to do is figure out what is positive, what is negative coming out of that plug. There again, there's a couple ways we can do this. some easier than others. Because this is a Honda, and it's a regular Honda plug behind the radio, between the radio and the amplifier, it's a straight shot. So if we have a Honda plug that'll plug in, like a factory to add an aftermarket radio, we can plug that in, and we can see which one is positive, negative, positive, negative. That would be the easiest way to do it. However, you're not always going to get that lucky, because let's say the amplifier is in the back. Who knows? Either way, there's of course some tools to do that we use. Now you can use an oscilloscope, but if you don't have one of those, my preferred method is this guy right here. This is a little dork Bluetooth amplifier, and what it does is it has an auxiliary input right here, and it has a speaker level output, and it plugs into the cigarette lighter and it has a volume knob. So what we do is we take this guy, we attach a speaker to it, because just like back in science class, you want to have your fixed and your variable. In audio, you want to have as many fixed, meaning you know the outcome, as possible. In this case, we have a speaker attached to it, so we know what's positive, negative on this speaker. What we don't know is what is positive, negative there. Now we have an aux to RCA adapter we can plug in, and there again we know what is positive and negative. We have our set of test leads that we can plug in, and we know what is positive and negative. We have our polarity tester, which will tell us what is positive and negative, and we have a test track in the radio that is going to produce a speaker pop, that tick tick sound that you guys have heard in the videos before. What we're going to do now is we're going to plug this back into those same two wires we just measured, so we can hear that ticking sound. Take our polarity tester. Now what we want to see is the green, green, red. What we have connected under the dash here, whatever the positive is in and whatever the negative is in, means that those two wires are positive and negative. Now when we go to attach into our line level device, such as a DSP, we know what channels we need to use as positive and what to use for negative. So now what we want to do is repeat that on all four of the channels, so that when we go into the back and we hook up our RCAs to it, we won't get the polarity wrong and screw things up. As you can see from this, there's a process from start to finish to figure out how to get to that end and what you should be using. So as an installer, one of the things that we're called upon often to do is upgrade an existing aftermarket stereo. And what we have behind us here in this 2004 Ford F-150 is just that. Located in the dash right now, we have an off-brand 6.5-inch touchscreen DVD player. He also has a full set of amplifiers in the back, subwoofer under the seat. What he's looking to do today is just add a backup camera and replace this with something that is of better quality. That in itself sounds very simple. However, depending on what it looks like behind the radio, we could be in for a lot of fun. Quoting a job like this is tricky because everything is hidden out of sight. It's not until you pull the panels back do you see what you just gotten yourself into. For this job, all we're scheduled to do is replace the radio and, as I said, add a backup camera. So hopefully we won't run into anything too severe back there where we'll have to go have that conversation with the customer about, hey, yeah. So let's head in and see what it looks like behind there. That's usually a good indication for what the rest of the system is going to look like. So as we're heading into the vehicle, you notice these seat covers here. These are actually our seat covers, and we put them on all the cars we do. We have this ugly red steering wheel cover that we order, and the reason why it's red, so we won't forget it in the car. And then we always cover up our gear shifter, and these are actually just little kids' socks, and we put 2 socks in there. It's actually a double sock, and that's designed to keep this protected so you don't scratch this up at all. If it has an armrest, we put a piece of carpet on the armrest to protect that as well. As you can see from these seats, it's probably not totally necessary to put covers in. However, whether the car needs it or not, we do it just because it's habit, meaning every time a car comes in, we repeat the same process. Steering wheel cover, gear shift cover, cover the seats. Other than just being old, I think we're okay. So they used a factory harness. All the wires that aren't going anything are shielded. It has an old iPod connector in the glove box. It looks like at one point it had a standalone Sirius Xm adapter. Yep, here's the antenna right here. They did use a T-tap to tap in for it, which is unfortunate. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and remove the T-tap and see if the wire's damaged underneath it. If it is, we'll solder it back together. Here's the old FM modulator. They use speed wire to connect into the amplifier. It looks like they did the tape trick where they put tape on the rear and no tape on the front, and then the sub RCA is a different color. We'll go ahead and add in heat shrink on these that are white, gray, green, purple to match. Add in our harness and remove their harness. Along with replacing the radio, as I said, we're putting in a backup camera. For this, we're using a tag cam. The reason why I like this one is it is very small. Thin here on the bottom, it's thin here on the top. It hides itself into the car. If you're just walking by, it looks like a standard license plate. You don't notice this little tiny camera here, and it also swivels up and down. Really popular these days are putting in handle cam. What we found with those, the customers actually with those will come in and have us disconnect the factory ones and put tag cams in. And the reason they do that is because when this is down, the camera's looking at the ground and is not functional, as where you have a tag cam, you can still see behind you. So we do carry handle cams for people that are going to always drive with their tailgate up, but if you're not, we suggest getting the tag cam. One of the other things that we do when installing a backup camera, along with running the dedicated camera wire, some of these backup cameras have these little pigtails like this that are just a power and a ground. And the idea behind hooking this up is that you're going to get power from the light, it's going to loop through, and it's going to connect right here on the end of the RCA. So when you plug this into your radio, this can then trigger the backup camera. And then for ground, you just go ahead and ground it in the back somewhere. In my opinion, there's a couple flaws with that. For one, I don't want to use my reverse lights to power up my camera. Even though most cameras really don't draw that much amperage, most of them actually work off of 6 volts. There's a step-down converter built into them to take them to that 6 volt. It's still not the right way to do it. The reverse light is a reverse light. Let it do its thing. The main reason for it is that most of these radios, you can actually go in and turn the camera on when you're not in reverse. If you're just sitting in a parking lot, you want to see what's going on behind you, just hit a button on the screen, it pops up. When we're done, I'll show you what I'm talking about. The next thing is the ground wire, especially on a truck. The truck bed is not necessarily connected to the frame as a ground. There is ground on this because it's metal, and there's metal somewhere in the bolts and whatnot, but it's not a good ground source. You have to take it to the frame. When you're trying to connect an 18 gauge wire to a 1/4 inch thick piece of steel, seems kind of silly. You just go ahead and we run a full accessory and ground all the way up front. We do have to tap the reverse back at the light, which sometimes you have to. We'll also run that 3rd reverse wire, and then we'll cover everything up in loom and run it into the front of the car. That way we have total control of everything that's happening in the back at the camera, and there's no connections made back at the camera other than just plugging the camera in. It also makes service a little bit better too. If the camera should go bad, I can just unplug it, plug a new one in, and I know that my wiring is all protected and zip tied to the frame rail, and that's probably not going to cause me any issues. Camera's in full prep mode now, is covered and loomed, and then all the wiring that is not essential is covered in silicone filled marine grade heat shrink so that water won't get into it. Once it's done and it connects to the other one, it'll have electrolytic jelly put in it as well as more silicone over that to keep the connection nice and watertight. And this is the harness that is going to run up front. It's covered in the loom. Here is your accessory ground. In this case, we don't need the reverse trigger because that's in the cab. For installing a camera, we found the easiest thing to do is have a nice roll around, climb on, and head up underneath the bottom of the vehicle. So once you get under the vehicle, you're going to be attaching the camera into this frame rail here, staying away from obviously any of the suspension systems, your exhaust pipe, as well as any of the gas tank that's located up inside over here. The main harness runs along this area, and that's where you're going to be going with it. Another step when installing a backup camera that we like to do once we get it mounted onto the car is test it to make sure that it turns on so that we can see what the camera is doing. We can also use this when we're doing front cameras so we can angle the camera up and down to find the best angle for it while we're mocking up its position in the car. Nothing sucks worse than getting a camera mounted, run the whole wire through the car, and then find out that the camera's bad. Some of the cameras from like radio manufacturing companies, they don't use a multi-part harness like this. In some cases, the connection point is 6 feet down or 10 feet down. If you've ran that through the car and in the end you find out the camera doesn't work, well, that could stink. Now that we have the radio out of the dash and we have just the RCAs hanging out, we want to do some testing to make sure when we add back in our system, as like we said, we're going to put the different color shrink wrap on them so we know which is front, rear, and sub. We want to make sure that everything is functioning the way it's supposed to. For that, we'll need some tools. We're going to head over to our testing drawer, and we're gonna grab the tone generator, the portable polarity tester, and our handheld polarity tester. This one is gonna generate a signal into the RCAs. All right, let's take these over to the car. I went over and cut off our little pieces of heat shrink to attach to these RCNs here. These are labeled coming out of the radio rear and front, and they have this little piece of tape here. However, we don't know if these are correct at all. We're just gonna go ahead and unplug them. We didn't put this radio in, so I can't really trust it, and there's a way to test it, which will guarantee our outcome. We'll grab the remote turn on, connect that to constant 12 volts in the radio plug. We'll take our tone generator, grab one of the RCAs, and go ahead and plug it in, turn it on, and that's interesting. I get no sound. We'll switch to a different RCA. I heard something that time. 3, which is the driver's rear. 4, which would be the passenger rear, isn't playing. Looking at the RCAs, the one with the tape was actually connected to rear. So if we would have just followed the way they had it, we would have gotten front and rear backwards. There's really no way to tell left from right. One is silver and one is black, but these RCAs are old as could be. All right, let's try the fronts. So this RCA is 1, which is the driver's front. Put a white piece of heat shrink on that. Put a gray piece of heat shrink on what is more than likely going to be passenger. We'll also test it just to make sure that sound is coming out of it. So that one makes sound. The next thing we want to do is polarity test them. There could be a polarity issue in here. We put it in and it sounds like crap. Best just to test. Start with speaker 1. We're going to use our handheld polarity tester here to go over to the door and see what it's doing. Driver's door is flashing green. Let's test the passenger side. And both of those are flashing the same color, both the tweeter and the mid-range. Test the one rear speaker that works. And it too is in polarity as well. Now we know which RCAs are front and which one is rear. The last one we want to do is test subwoofer, just to make sure that it makes noise. Subwoofer works. Tested everything we can behind the radio to guarantee our end result. When I wire up a harness, one of the things I like to do where the connections are is a separate piece of tape. That way if I do need to come back in, I can unravel just that area where my connections are. So let's say I do need to add in a power or a ground. I can just peel off this one little section of tape and not affect the rest of the tape job. We added in our power and ground for the backup camera. We also pulled the T-tap off that was in here. It was fine. It actually was making almost no contact on the wire. Went ahead and put some tape over that, and because it is Florida and it gets really hot here, we also like to put a zip tie over the piece of tape just to make sure that in a couple months that tape doesn't come off. Now we usually wrap it about 3 or 4 times so it's properly insulated. The speakers are all capped off with butt connectors on the radio side, so we don't have to worry about them shorting out against anything, as well as any other wiring that is not going to be used. Wind cutting zip ties. Flush cutters. We bleed enough doing this job. I have a band-aid right here. Zip ties are vicious monsters that will just flush cutters solve that. The last step is finding the reverse, which should be over here in the driver's case. For testing the reverse wire, we're gonna need a digital multimeter. So we'll head over to our tool drawer and grab one. We'll also need a wire probe tester. For Ford, it's typically a black ink wire. Looks like this guy right here. So take our positive test lead, connect it to our piercer. We're gonna switch it to DC, which is the solid line with the dots beneath it. Take our second and go to ground and turn on our car. Do one click back, and as you can see, the meter is giving us 12 volts. We'll go ahead and take it out of reverse. It goes away. So this is the wire we're gonna need to connect to in order to feed our radio a trigger. So grab our wire strippers, and these will slide a small amount of the wire apart, and we can poke a hole in it, kind of like a needle, and now we can thread our wire that we're planning on adding directly to that. For running over to the radio, we've taken some purple primary wire, and we've loomed it up and taped up the end, thread it through our hole, twist it around a couple times. I personally like to add just a little bit of solder to it, and then I'll insulate it with some tape. I like to do 2 wraps of tape just to make sure that it's good and secured. Getting to this, we actually had to remove some of the factory tape. Go ahead and put tape back in to replace the factory tape that we cut out. Once that's done, zip tie our wire along with our new camera wire into place and get them up behind the radio. What's the weather like today?
It's currently clear and
Now that we're done, just like the previous car, we test it to make sure that things we've installed work. Microphone works. A common question we ask is, what's the weather like? Because she's going to respond to that. The backup camera is working. And as I said, I was going to talk about why we connect it the way we do. When you hit menu, camera comes up here. We tap it, it goes ahead and launches the camera. It's not in reverse. If we had a front camera connected at the same time, we could tap the screen and it would switch between front and rear cameras. If we tap the bottom, it goes ahead and shuts it off. This is a feature that's only there if you have the camera having power while the car is on and not just in reverse.
My name is John. I'm in my late 40s. I got started in car audio back in 1990 when I was in college here in Columbus, Ohio. Through college and about 3 to 4 years afterwards, I was heavy into it. Then lost the urge, bug, lost interest in it. Jump forward 30 years, started watching you guys on YouTube. Got bit by the bug. Started that spark again. Per your recommendation, I went ahead and got the 5-channel Rocket Fosgate T1000 amp, upgraded the speakers, added a sub, eventually updated the head unit to a nice Kenwood. But I just want to say that if it wasn't for YouTube, I would still be rolling around on a factory Kia sound system. Last month I came down to Florida to visit Dean and Fernando. Nicest two people I've ever met.
So this past year, one of the things I've been trying to achieve for a very long time finally happened. I've been working on this for years, countless hours. It's an amazing amount of work I've put into this, and that's getting 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. I wanted to be one of the first active installers, meaning I do this for a living, to have my own channel and make YouTube videos that would get people excited about car audio. We don't have magazines anymore. We don't have any outreach to get people interested in our stuff other than just making cool things. But if no one's telling people about cool things, then how are they going to find out? Along with that, one of the other things I wanted to do more personally was run a marathon. I had a little health issue that kind of led up into this year. Because of YouTube, I didn't take time out for myself, or my family for that matter. It was just countless hours of editing, and I had blinders on to get to that point. Now that I'm there, I've loosened up a little bit. So I run as many times a week as I possibly can. And earlier this year, I finally did it. I did it in just over 4 hours. It was an amazing amount of work to run for 4 hours. It takes a special kind of crazy to do that. Leading up to that, I'd run a half marathon a week just to get ready for it. And every time I do that, I'd be thinking, how the heck am I gonna double this? Those two things, they're a big part of what has made this year crazy. The third thing is being involved in this, running for Trusted Tech. I never thought this was even possible, let alone being this far along in it, making this video and telling you guys about it. It's been an incredible year, that's for sure.
What's up guys at 5 Star Car Stereo? What's up Dean? This is Chris from Lansing, Michigan. Wanted to send you this video to let you know how much you've helped me out over the past year with your knowledge. Not only have you answered my questions online, you've greatly increased my knowledge as far as what's going on with today's cars, and you've really revived my love for car audio. Now I've been installing since the early 90s, but in the last few years kind of fell out because of all the technology and all the new things, and being at a big box store, I really don't get a lot of training. The only knowledge that I get is what I look for either on the internet or through calling tech support with PAC or Directed or any of our other products that we carry. And I can't stress enough on how much you have revived my love for car audio. The way you guys install, the way you share your knowledge. You know, there used to be a time that in car audio people did not want to share their knowledge, and if you didn't know, you were pretty much out of luck. Nobody was going to tell you anything. Nowadays it's a lot different. He is not biased from one product to the next. He tells you what works and he tells you what doesn't work. I really hope that you consider Dean Trusted Tech, because by far he's the #1 trusted tech in my book. Good luck, Dean.
Hey Fernando, what's going on? How you doing?
Good man, how are you?
You know, I'm me. When I was a kid, my mom taught me to do the best job that you can do. And that has followed through my career in car audio my whole life. I really wanted to work hard for it. I would come in early, I would stay late. And eventually, I learned everything I could from that employer. It was time to move on to my next employer. Here, when I showed up, there was nothing. It was a clean slate. It was 4 walls and a ceiling. We had no logo. We're starting from scratch. So I stepped up. I said, I can design us a logo. I know how to do that. After all, what I went to school for, art. We needed a web page. I could do that too. I did that at my previous employer. Anytime there's been something that needs to be done, I'm the first one to volunteer to do it. Hopefully, that'll show the people around me that, hey, I should step up too. I'm not gonna let this guy be the guy that takes all the limelight and has all the fun and gets all the credit. I show by example. I wanna show you that yes, if you work hard, if you go that extra mile, if you do the thing that doesn't wanna be done, like cleaning a bathroom, you'll be rewarded for it. Here we have 3 employees, myself and 2 others. And when we decided to bring in another installer, because originally it was just the 2 of us, it was kind of a struggle. I wanted to find somebody that I could teach and show how installation can be done. I've been doing it for years at my other employer. I was the installation manager there. So I showed many young installers the ropes on installation. We found somebody and I started training him because he learned and absorbed everything I was telling him like a sponge. And then he would challenge me, challenge some of the things I would come up with because he knew I was doing the same thing by challenging him. And I enjoy that because it keeps me on my toes. It shows that the values I've been trying to install in them and the goals that I have been getting through. After all, if you're just talking to talk, what fun is that? But if you're talking and hoping that they're receiving you and they're showing you that they are, that's a wonderful feeling to have. So basically what I'm trying to do is be the best employee I can for this business, to lead by example and be a role model for anyone that wants to follow. Just don't follow me in here.
Hi Dean, I'm Fernando. Hi guys. Just wanted to give you a big shout out, a big obrigado from Portugal. This is Luis speaking to you. Just want to thank you as a fan and as a peer in the industry. I wanted to give you a thumbs up for all the good work and the big effort that you make every day to step up the industry. Just want to give you a big thank you. Bye guys.
Right now in this industry is probably one of the funnest times that I've ever had. I'm going on 29 years. I've been in it when it was the most amazing, all the way down to when it was, I don't even know if I'm gonna have a paycheck at the end of the week. But now is fun again. There's so much new technology that's coming out to play with and just, yeah. And that's where my goal for this industry is a little bit different than everyone else's. Because I have a YouTube channel, and that YouTube channel's purpose is to share my excitement and my discovery with as many people as I possibly can. The whole world. Installers, sales guys, manufacturers, hobbyists, DIY guys. Anybody that's interested in 12 volts, I want to appeal to them and show them the stuff that's out right now. How to put it in, how to use it, how to talk about it, what to buy, what not to buy. Good practices in the industry and bad practices in the industry. Demystifying certain topics that people have like, ooh. No, I make videos about all that, and it's fun. And people that come along with me on the journey, they have a good time too. I said at the beginning of the video that we do 2 live shows a week, one of them on Facebook, one of them on YouTube. And the really neat thing about that, it has introduced me to a whole new group of people. And I go to Knowledge Fest. We've gone to 2 Knowledge Fests so far. Not only that, we're actually teaching how to do videos at this Dallas Knowledge Fest that's coming up. I'm super excited about that, because I love sharing. That's the whole purpose of me entering this contest, is I love sharing what I know with people that want to learn it. But the reason why we decided to do the live shows is because we were just getting too many questions that we couldn't answer. By going live, that gives us the ability to be one-on-one, and by one-on-one I mean me with thousands of ones that can ask me questions and I can answer them immediately. So I don't have to sit there and type it out. And those questions lead to other questions and lead to other questions. And before you know it, the hour is over. It's also allowed me the ability to interview people. So when I have a reoccurring topic, we'll have people on that can talk to that topic. Or we'll get people on that have been in the industry for a long period of time. I even got to interview Steve Irby, owner of Kicker. It was one of the most exciting moments in my life because I've been in the industry long enough to know what he's done. Now, one of the odd things that's happened as a result of all this is I get people that stop by here all the time. A lot of them are from other shops. A lot of them are from manufacturers. They come in and they just want to say hi and introduce themselves. One day we were working and Alex, the owner of Audio Control, stopped by and said, "Hey man, I'm a huge fan," in a British accent, and just hung out for an hour. And we had a great time talking with him about the company and the direction it's going. And Chris Bennett, how cool he is. And speaking of Chris Bennett, we've had him on the show like 4 or 5 times. Now what does this mean for making professionals better? When I walk around Knowledge Fest, I have people come up to me and say thank you all the time. It blows my mind. It is humbling beyond words. And they'll tell me a story of a problem they had or techniques that they've changed from watching the videos I put out, and it's great to know that I could help in some little bit. Now, it's taken time to get to where we're at now, but I'm in a good place, and I'm teaching a lot of people a lot of neat stuff, and we've made a lot of neat friends, and we've expanded and expanded and expanded to include those people and introduce them to new people that are in their neighborhoods. We want to help them too, because there's a lot of great stereo shops out there, and we want to talk about them as well. After all, we're over here in Clearwater, Florida. Not everyone can come here and have us do stereos, and there's tons and tons of great installers all over this country and all over the world that do great work, that have a very small voice. And if we can make their voice louder, and that's the purpose of us teaching a class in Knowledge Fest this year, is so that we can show people how to make their voices louder, how to drive business to their stores using this wonderful media of video, and how to get their message out to everyone else like we have.
Hey everybody, Chris Bennett with Audio Control, and I just wanted to add one last thing. Dean's an installing machine.
Topping this year is going to be really hard. I had lofty goals that I never thought would happen, and then they happened this year. So that's incredible. Growth is an amazing thing. Change happens all the time, and you want to continue to do that. My big thing this year is learning, continuing education, and then sharing the education that I've got. Be invited out to attend trainings. It's something I've always wanted to do, and I'm going to be doing this year and years to come. But here in the shop, we never rest on our laurels. We're always developing new techniques, faster ways of doing something, cleaner ways of doing something, better ways of doing something. I just made a huge investment in myself, and that I bought a Glowforge laser to do just that, to make cooler templates, to make better adapters, to increase that customer experience. And that's where I'm headed this year. I want to continue on that growth, continue growing our network of friends and followers, and that learning and that sharing. I just want to keep doing that because for me it feels like it's moving in the right direction, and it's a lot of fun to be part of.
Hey, my name is Artie from AMP Global, Northeast Regional. I just want to say that I've known Dean for 27 years. I've watched him grow into the person and the installer and the businessman that he is today. I've been in the business 40 years, so I've met a lot of people in my day, but nobody with more integrity, intelligence, and compassion for this industry. That's why it's my honor and my pleasure to recommend him for this 2019 award. My name is Artie, and I approve this message.
Finally, last question. Why should you be the 2019 Trusted Tech? 8 simple words. 8 simple words that I knew were coming months ago when I started on this journey. 8 simple words that I've been dreaded answering. Let's think about it for a minute. What does it mean to be the Trusted Tech? In my mind, it means a couple things. It means being the guy that's willing to put himself out there to help other people, to answer the questions that might not necessarily be answered, to be willing to put yourself in front of a room of people and say, hey, this is how this is done. To talk to people late at night that are having a hard time and can't figure something out. To be the guy that goes to a training class, or every training class, and sits in the front row and is eager to learn and eager to share. To be the brunt of jokes. You have to be. To be someone willing to go that extra mile that somebody else might not be willing to. To be somebody that people look at and they immediately see and they trust what they have to say because you've proven yourself to them that you understand and they know that you're not going to lead them awry. It's 8 simple words and a question that has been weighing heavy on me since the beginning of all this. Do I feel I deserve this? Most definitely. I feel I have what it takes to be the Trusted Tech. I feel I give everything that I possibly can for this industry and the betterment of it. To move in a direction of positive growth and understanding and sharing. And I share as much as I possibly can. And I hope you guys feel the same way and make me your 2019 Trusted Tech. Thanks so much for watching as always. You guys have a wonderful night. I'll see you later next time. Bye.